Europe is ancient, older than kingdoms, older than kings, older than the stones of its ruined castles, older than the maps that try to contain it. Its soil is heavy with memory, and its shadows are thick with fear. In the forests, beasts wait. In the mountains, giants stir. In the rivers, spirits whisper. On lonely roads, hounds with burning eyes still walk the night. Every village has a story, every valley has a curse, every border hides a legend that refuses to die. Some of these creatures are carved into legend, feared for centuries, named in holy texts and hunted by desperate men. Others live only in whispers, the warnings of the old, the tales told in firelight, meant to keep children close to home. But whether saint or sinner, king or peasant, all knew the same truth, that Europe is not just built of stone and soil, it is built of shadows, and in those shadows, monsters linger. This is the ultimate guide to Europe's hidden beasts. 100 myths, 100 monsters, 100 nightmares. Our journey begins in the dark, superstitious heart of the old world, in the remote mountain villages of Romania. This is a land that is haunted by the long, cold shadow of the vampire. But before the aristocratic Count Dracula ever graced the pages of a novel, the peasants and villagers of this land lived in fear of a far more primal and far more gruesome form of the undead. They feared the strigoi. The name itself is ancient, believed to be derived from the Latin word strix, for a screech owl, a creature that was long associated with witchcraft and ill omens. The strigoi were not just one thing. They were a complex and terrifying taxonomy of the undead. There were the strigoi vix, the living witches or sorcerers who could send their souls out at night to torment the living and to feast on the life force of their neighbors. But the true terror was the strigoi mor, the dead strigoi, the corpse that would not stay in its grave. It was believed that certain people were doomed to become strigoi after their death. The unbaptized, the cursed, the seventh son of a seventh son, or anyone who had lived a life of great sin. When such a person died, their soul was trapped, and their body would become an unholy vessel, animated by a demonic hunger. The strigoi would rise from its grave, often in the form of an animal, a dog, a wolf, a raven, and it would return to its old home. It would torment its own surviving family, causing poltergeist-like activity, bringing sickness and draining the life force, and sometimes the blood, of both the livestock and the living. The strigoi of the folklore was not a charming, seductive creature. It was a hideous, walking corpse, its body often bloated and ruddy with the blood it had consumed, its mouth stained a deep, dark red. It was a creature of the plague, a spreader of disease, a foul and pestilential ghoul. To destroy it, the villagers had to perform a grim and gruesome ritual. They would exhume the body, cut out its heart, and burn it to ashes, and often drive a stake of hawthorn or ashwood through the chest, pinning the monster, once and for all, back to the cold and silent earth. In the shadowy landscape of Romanian folklore, the strigoi was not the only creature to crawl from the grave. There was another, closely related and yet subtly different form of the undead. This was the moroi. While the names are often used interchangeably, the moroi of the old folklore had a distinct and deeply tragic identity. If the strigoi was a creature of pure demonic malice, the moroi was a creature of sorrow. The name itself is believed to be derived from an old Slavic word for nightmare. A moroi was, in essence, a ghost, the restless, disembodied spirit of a dead person, but it was a ghost with a terrible and deeply dangerous physical power. A moroi was most often the spirit of a child who had died before being baptized, an innocent soul that had been denied entry into heaven and was now trapped, weeping and confused, between the worlds. In their loneliness and their grief, these ghostly children would return to their old homes, seeking the comfort and the life force that they themselves had been denied. Unlike the often brutish and violent strigoi, the moroi was a more subtle and insidious predator. It was a psychic vampire. It did not need to drink blood. It would feed on the vital energy, the life force, of its own living relatives, often its own parents or siblings, as they slept. The victims of a moroi would feel a profound and inexplicable exhaustion. They would grow pale, weak, apathetic. They were being slowly and gently drained of their will to live, their own life force being used to sustain the sad, lonely, and deeply tragic existence of their undead child. The moroi is a heartbreaking and deeply personal kind of monster, a creature born not of sin, but of a sorrow so profound that it has become a hungry and life-draining ghost. We travel north, into the dark, dense forests and the cold, windswept plains of Poland, and here we meet a creature that is, in many ways, one of the most savage, most bloodthirsty, and most terrifyingly powerful of all the Eastern European vampires. This is the Upior. The Upior is a creature of pure, ravenous, and almost bestial hunger. Its name is ancient, and it is believed to be one of the original Proto-Slavic terms from which the very word vampire itself would later evolve. The Upior of Polish legend was not a subtle psychic predator. It was a full-blown, blood-drinking, and brutally physical monster. It was believed that a person who was born with 2 hearts, 2 souls, and 2 rows of teeth was destined to become an Upior after their death. When they died, only one of their souls would pass on. The other, darker soul would remain trapped in the corpse, and it would reanimate the body with a terrible and deeply unnatural strength. The Upior would claw its way out of its grave, and it would begin its hunt. It possessed an incredible, almost explosive, physical power. It could run faster than a horse, and it could tear a man limb from limb with its bare hands. But its true defining characteristic was its insatiable thirst for blood. It would attack its victims with a savage, animalistic fury, biting them on the neck and drinking their blood until they were nothing but a dry, pale husk. The Upior was also a creature of the day. Unlike the Strigoi or the modern vampire, it was not weakened by the sunlight. It could hunt at noon as easily as it could at midnight, and it was famously and terrifyingly difficult to kill. A simple stake through the heart was not enough. To destroy an Upior, you had to perform a specific and gruesome ritual. The body had to be exhumed and decapitated. The severed head had to be placed between its legs. And then, the entire body had to be burned to ashes. Anything less, and the monster would simply return, its rage and its hunger now amplified by the failed attempt to destroy it. The Upior was a true apex predator of the undead world. In the haunted folklore of Poland, the Upior was not the only vampire to stalk the night. There was another, closely related and equally terrifying creature, a being that often blurred the lines between a witch, a demon, and an undead monster. This was the Striga. The Striga, like its Romanian cousin, the Strigoi, takes its name from the ancient Roman Strix, the blood-drinking owl demon. And like the Polish Upior, a Striga was believed to be a human being who was born with 2 souls. While they were alive, they were often witches or sorcerers, people who had a deep and malevolent connection to the supernatural world. But their true, monstrous nature was only fully revealed after their death. When a Striga died, 1 soul would depart, but the second, darker soul would remain, and it would reanimate the corpse. The Striga would then rise from its grave and would fly through the night, often in the form of an owl, its eerie, screeching cry a harbinger of death. It would hunt, not just for blood, but for the raw flesh and the internal organs of its victims. It was a cannibalistic ghoul, a creature that would disembowel its prey and devour their insides. The Striga was also believed to be a spreader of a deadly and incurable plague. To be in the presence of a Striga, to even breathe the same air that it had passed through, was to invite sickness and death into your home. It was a creature of pure, pestilential, and deeply unclean evil. To protect oneself from a Striga, one had to bury the suspected corpse face down, so that if it tried to claw its way out of the grave, it would only dig itself deeper into the earth. But to truly destroy it, the same brutal ritual of decapitation and burning was required. The Striga was a terrifying fusion of the witch, the vampire, and the ghoul, a multi-talented and deeply unpleasant monster from the darkest corners of the Polish imagination. We journey now to the cold, dark, and windswept coastlines of Scandinavia, to the world of the Vikings. And here, in the burial mounds of the great and powerful Norse chieftains, we meet a creature that is not just a simple, hungry corpse. This is a creature of immense power, of deep personal malice, and of an unyielding and deeply territorial rage. This is the Draugr. The Draugr, in the old Norse sagas, is a revenant, a reanimated corpse. But it is not a mindless zombie. The Draugr retains the personality, the memories, and the intelligence of the man it once was. But all of its good qualities have been burned away, leaving behind only the worst. the greed, the pride, the jealousy, the pure, black-hearted evil. It is a corpse that has been possessed not by a demon, but by the very worst parts of its own human soul. The Draga would rise from its burial mound to guard the treasure that it had been buried with. It was a creature of incredible supernatural strength, capable of crushing a man's bones to powder in its icy grip. It could shapeshift, often taking the form of a great bull or a monstrous headless horse. It could also control the weather, summoning great dark storms to sink the ships of its enemies. And it was a creature that reeked of the grave, its very presence a foul and deeply unnatural stench of decay. But the most terrifying power of the Draga was its ability to invade the minds of the living. It would appear in the dreams of its victims, a terrifying, nightmarish vision, tormenting them, driving them slowly mad. It was a creature that fought a war on two fronts, the physical and the psychological. To defeat a Draga was not just a matter of physical courage, it required an immense and often unbreakable force of will. The Draga was not just a monster to be killed, it was a test, a final terrifying exam for the heroes of the Norse sagas. To face a Draga, to enter its dark and silent barrow, to fight it in a battle of both body and mind, and to emerge victorious into the light of day was the ultimate proof of a hero's worth. The Draga was the guardian of the threshold between life and death, a terrible and deeply necessary monster that a hero had to defeat in order to truly become a legend. We travel now to the German-speaking lands, and we find a creature that is, in many ways, one of the most bizarre, most gruesome, and most deeply unsettling of all the European undead. This is not a creature that leaves its grave. It is a monster that kills from a distance, a creature that devours not the bodies of its victims, but the very fabric of its own family, from the cold, dark, and suffocating confines of its own coffin. This is the Naxxera. The name translates, chillingly, to the after-devourer or the night devourer. The Naxxera was believed to be a person who had died in an unnatural way, particularly through suicide or an accident. And in the grave, a strange and deeply unholy transformation would occur. The corpse would not decay. Instead, it would remain strangely lifelike, and it would begin to eat. It would begin to chew on its own burial shroud, its own clothes, and eventually its own hands and feet, making a strange, wet, and deeply unsettling smacking and grunting sound that could, it was said, sometimes be heard from above the grave. And as the Naxxera chewed on its own body in the grave, its living family members in the world above would begin to sicken and die. This was a terrifying and deeply intimate form of sympathetic magic. The corpse was acting as a kind of supernatural voodoo doll for its own bloodline. It was literally and metaphorically consuming its own family from beyond the grave. And as its family members died, their life force would be transferred to the Naxxera, making it stronger, its own body in the grave growing fatter, ruddier, and more hideously lifelike. To stop a Naxxera, one had to perform a specific and deeply symbolic act of preventative medicine. The body had to be exhumed, and the priest or the village wise man would take a coin or a stone and they would place it in the corpse's mouth. And then they would take a large piece of cloth and they would tie the corpse's jaw shut, often so tightly that the neck was broken. Or, in the most extreme cases, they would simply decapitate the corpse with a gravedigger's spade. The goal was simple: to stop the creature from chewing, to break the terrible, sympathetic link, and to save the rest of the family from being slowly and inexplicably devoured by their own, dead and still very hungry relative. We journey now into the cold, dark, and deeply melancholic forests of Sweden to meet a ghost that is not born of sin or of a demonic pact, but of a terrible and deeply human tragedy. This is the ghost of a murdered child. This is the Myling. The Myling, or the Utbird in Norwegian, is the restless and often deeply malevolent ghost of an unwanted child who has been secretly killed and buried in an unconsecrated grave by its own mother. In a time of deep poverty and strict religious morality, the birth of an illegitimate child was a source of profound shame and a desperate economic burden. And sometimes, a desperate mother would make a terrible and unforgivable choice. But the soul of this unbaptized, unloved, and unmourned child could not find rest. It would rise from its shallow, unmarked grave, a sad and often very angry little ghost. The myling would haunt the place of its own murder, often the deep forest or the cold, windswept moor. And its cry could be heard in the night, a sound that was not the cry of a normal baby, but a sound that was said to be so loud, so piercing, and so full of a sorrowful rage that it could shatter stone. The myling was a creature of a deep and often dangerous longing. It longed for a proper burial, it longed for a name, it longed for the love that it had been denied in its own brief and brutally extinguished life. And it would often seek out a lone traveller in the night. It would leap onto the traveller's back and it would demand to be carried to the nearest graveyard. This was a terrifying and often fatal test. The myling would grow heavier and heavier with each step, its small, childish form taking on the weight of a full-grown man, its tiny hands digging into the traveller's shoulders like iron claws, trying to crush them into the earth. If the traveller was strong enough and brave enough to make it to the consecrated ground of the graveyard, the myling would finally be at peace, its soul released. But if the traveller stumbled, if they failed, the myling, in its rage and its disappointment, would kill them, tearing them apart with its supernatural strength. The myling is one of the most tragic and most terrifying of all the undead, a creature born of a mother's secret and a ghost that is forever searching for a final and peaceful home. In the broader pan-Slavic folklore, there exists a whole category, a whole species of the restless dead. These are the nav or the nawia. These are the souls of those who have died a premature, a violent, or an unclean death. They are the souls of the murdered, of those who have drowned, of women who have died in childbirth, of sorcerers, and of all those who have died without the proper funeral rites. The nav are not, as a rule, singular powerful entities like the Drauga or the Upior. They are a collective, a flock, a ghostly and often deeply malevolent army of the disgruntled dead. They were believed to be bird-like souls who would fly through the night sky in a great, dark and shrieking flock, bringing storms, hail, and disease with them. They were the spirits of chaos, of misfortune, of all the things that could go wrong in a fragile and uncertain world. To see the nav flying overhead was a terrible omen, and to be caught outside during their passing was to risk being attacked, to have your soul literally ripped from your body, and to be forced to join their sad and eternally restless, ghostly procession. The nav were the embodiment of a collective, social anxiety about the importance of a good death. They were a constant and deeply terrifying reminder that to die in the wrong way or at the wrong time was to be condemned to an eternity of restless and often deeply malevolent wandering. We travel now into the rugged, mountainous and deeply superstitious lands of the Balkans, a region of Serbia, of Bosnia, of Croatia, and here we meet a creature that is a terrifying and deeply bizarre fusion of a ghost, a demon, and an unknown animal. This is the Drekavac. The name translates chillingly to the screamer or the yeller, and it is a name that is well earned. The Drekavac is, first and foremost, a sound, a horrifying, blood-curdling and deeply unearthly scream that is said to be heard in the night, echoing through the lonely mountain valleys. It is a sound that is part a child's scream, part a wolf's howl, and part the shriek of a dying bird. To hear it is to feel a cold, primal fear grip your heart. The Drekavac is believed to be the restless soul of a dead, unbaptized child, much like the Swedish myling. But its form is far more monstrous. It is described as a strange, hairy, and vaguely canine-like creature, with a disproportionately large head and long, sharp claws. Sometimes it is seen as a creature that is part bird, part dog. Other times it is seen as a strange, spindly, and long-legged humanoid. Its appearance is a chaotic and deeply inconsistent mess. But its behavior is always the same. It is a creature of terror. It does not usually kill. Its purpose is to frighten. It will jump on the backs of livestock, riding them until they collapse from exhaustion. It will appear in the dreams of the villagers, a terrifying, nightmarish vision, and it will scream. It screams to announce its presence, to spread its terror, and perhaps to express the eternal, agonized sorrow of its own lost and unbaptized soul. The Drekavac is a pure, sonic horror, a creature that is less a physical threat and more a living, breathing, and eternally screaming manifestation of pure, unadulterated fear. We return to the misty, haunted lochs and streams of Scotland to meet a spirit that is a close and far more gruesome cousin of the Irish banshee. This is the Bean Nye. The name in Scottish Gaelic means the washerwoman, and that is exactly what she is. She is a ghostly, supernatural laundress, but she is not washing clothes. She is washing the bloody shrouds and the grave clothes of those who are about to die. She is seen, always alone, by the side of a secluded pool or a running stream, a small, stooped, and often ancient-looking woman weeping and wailing as she beats the bloody clothes against the stones. She is said to be the ghost of a woman who died in childbirth, and she is doomed to perform this grim and endless task until the day that her own natural death would have occurred. To see the Bean Nye is a terrifying and deeply personal omen of death. If you see her washing your own bloody shirt or the shirt of a loved one, it means that your or their death is imminent and unavoidable. But the Bean Nye is not just a passive harbinger. Unlike her Irish cousin, she is an interactive spirit. The folklore says that if you are brave enough and clever enough to approach her from behind, unseen, you can claim to be her foster child. And if you do this, she is magically bound to answer 3 questions for you. You can ask her the name of the person who is about to die. You can ask her other secrets of the future. She is a grim and deeply reluctant oracle, but to approach her is a great and terrible risk, for she is also a jealous and often malevolent spirit. And if she sees you first, she will strike you with her wet, bloody laundry, and the blow will break your legs or mark you for a short and painful life. The Bean Nye is a strange, sad, and deeply dangerous creature, a washerwoman whose laundry is human mortality itself and whose work is never, ever done. We return for a final time to the cold, dark, and fjord-haunted lands of Scandinavia, and here we meet a creature that is a terrifying and deeply physical form of the undead. This is not a ghost, this is a walking and very dangerous corpse. This is the Gjenganger. The name in Norwegian means the one who walks again, and it is a brutally literal description. The Gjenganger is the reanimated corpse of a person who has died a violent death, a murderer, a suicide, or a person who has left behind a deep and unresolved grievance. They are not a sorrowful ghost, they are a creature of pure and often deeply personal malice. The Gjenganger is a corporeal, physical being. It looks exactly as it did in life, though its skin is often a pale, bluish-white color, and its eyes hold a dead, hateful stare. It is a creature of pure physical violence. It will return to the world of the living to haunt and to physically assault its own family or the people who have wronged it in life. It will pinch its victims, leaving a blue, discolored mark on their skin, a mark that is known as the dead man's pinch. And this pinch is a carrier of a supernatural disease, a wasting sickness that will slowly drain the life from the victim, eventually leading to their death. The Gjenganger is a creature of a deep and deeply personal terror. It is not a random monster. It is your own, dead and deeply hateful grandfather who has returned from the grave to settle an old score. It is a terrifying reminder that some grudges, some hatreds, are so powerful that not even the finality of death can extinguish them. Our journey through the dark and crowded graveyards of Europe comes to an end with a creature that is, in many ways, the most insidious, the most psychologically terrifying, and the most personally devastating of all the undead. This is a monster that does not just kill you, it corrupts you, it turns your own family against you. This is the Wyrdelak. The Wyrdelak is a specific and deeply feared type of Slavic vampire, but its method of predation is what makes it so uniquely horrifying. The Wyrdelak does not hunt strangers. It does not prey on the anonymous masses. It is a creature that is bound by a terrible and unbreakable supernatural law to only ever feed on the blood of its own family. Imagine the horror. A person in your family dies, and they return. They return not as a raging, unrecognizable monster, but as themselves. They look the same, they sound the same, they come to your door at night and they ask to be let in. And because you love them, because you miss them, because you cannot believe the terrible truth of what they have become, you open the door. And in that moment, you have sealed your own doom and the doom of your entire family. The Wurdalak will then, one by one, night after agonizing night, feed on its own loved ones, its own wife, its own children, its own brothers and sisters. And as it drinks their blood, it does not just kill them, it transforms them, it turns them into Wurdalaks themselves. The family becomes a coven of the undead, a secret and deeply incestuous cult of blood-drinking monsters. The Wurdalak is a supernatural disease that spreads, not through a random bite, but through the sacred and now horribly corrupted bonds of family love and loyalty. It is a story that takes the most beautiful and most powerful of all human emotions, and it twists it into a weapon of pure and utterly inescapable horror. The Wurdalak is not a monster that you can fight with a stake or with silver. It is a monster that you have to fight with your own heart, and it is a battle that you are almost certainly doomed to lose. Before there was England, there was Albion. This was the ancient, mythological name for the island of Great Britain, a name that speaks of a time before history, a time of deep, primordial magic. And in this forgotten age, the island was not ruled by men. It was the domain of a race of savage and immensely powerful giants. The story, as it was recorded by the medieval chronicler Geoffrey of Monmouth, is a foundational myth, a story designed to give the British people a lineage as grand and as ancient as that of Rome itself. It tells of a Trojan prince named Brutus, a descendant of the hero Aeneas, who was exiled from his homeland and was guided by the gods to this remote western island. He arrived to find a paradise, a land of green hills and deep forests. But it was a paradise that was already occupied. The giants of Albion were said to be a wild, cannibalistic, and lawless race, the monstrous children of the earth itself. The greatest and most terrible of them all was a giant named Gogmagog, a creature of almost 18 feet in height, who could uproot an oak tree and wield it like a club. The story tells of a great final battle between Brutus's Trojan army and the last of the Albion giants. The Trojans, though smaller, were more disciplined and technologically advanced, and they slaughtered the brutish giants. All were killed except for Gogmagog himself, who was taken alive for a final symbolic spectacle. The Trojan champion, Coroneus, engaged the great giant in a one-on-one wrestling match. In the titanic struggle, Gogmagog was defeated, lifted onto Coroneus's shoulders, and hurled from the top of a high, seaside cliff, his body shattered on the rocks below. With that final, epic act of violence, the age of the giants was over. The age of men, the age of Britain, had begun. The story is a creation myth, but it is also, perhaps, a dim folk memory of a much older and very real struggle. The battle between early human settlers and the terrifying, now extinct megafauna of the last ice age, the true forgotten giants of Albion. We travel now to the cold, stark, and brutal world of the Norsemen, a land of ice, of fire, of gods, and of monsters. And here, in the frozen mountainous wastes of the realm known as Jotunheimr, lived a race of beings who were the sworn, eternal enemies of the gods themselves. These were the Jotun, the Norse giants. The Jotun were not the simple, dim-witted, and brutish giants of later European folklore. They were a race of ancient, powerful, and often highly intelligent beings, the living, breathing embodiments of the raw, chaotic, and untamable forces of nature. They were the masters of the storm, of the avalanche, of the earthquake, of the crushing, grinding power of the glacier. They were the forces of chaos, locked in an eternal cosmic war with the forces of order, the Aesir gods of Asgard. There were many different kinds of Jotun. There were the frost giants, the Hrimthursa, who lived in the frozen wastes of the north. There were the fire giants led by their king, Surtur, who lived in the burning volcanic realm of Muspelheim, and who were destined to emerge at Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods, to burn the entire world to ashes with their flaming swords. The Jotun were not always evil, but they were always dangerous. They were the ultimate other, a race of beings who were as intelligent and as complex as the gods, but whose motivations and whose morality were utterly alien. They were the rivals, the lovers, and the ultimate destroyers of the Norse gods. The story of the Jotun is the story of a universe that is not a safe or a stable place. It is a story of a world that is in a constant state of war, A world where even the gods themselves can and will be defeated by the vast, ancient, and ultimately victorious power of the giants. We journey south to the sun-drenched, wine-dark seas and the rocky, mountainous islands of ancient Greece. And here, in the dark, smoky caves of the earth, a different and far more monstrous kind of giant was said to live. A creature of a profound and deeply unsettling singularity. This was the Cyclops. The Cyclopes were a race of massive, one-eyed giants. Their most famous and most terrifying member was the great cannibalistic monster Polyphemus, who was encountered by the hero Odysseus on his long and deeply treacherous journey home from the Trojan War. Odysseus and his men, seeking shelter, entered a large, well-stocked cave, only to find that it was the home of this monstrous shepherd. Polyphemus returned with his flock of giant sheep. He rolled a massive boulder across the mouth of the cave, trapping them inside, and then he began to eat them, grabbing 2 of Odysseus's men, smashing their heads against the rocks and devouring them, raw, bones and all. Odysseus, through his cunning, manages to get the giant drunk on wine, and then, while the monster sleeps, he and his men take a huge, sharpened olive stake. They heat its point in the fire, and they drive it, with all their combined strength, into the creature's single, massive eye, blinding him. The story of the Cyclops is a classic tale of intelligence triumphing over brute force. But there was another, older, and far more noble race of Cyclopes in Greek mythology. These were the first 3 Cyclopes, the sons of Uranus and Gaia, the sky and the earth. They were master smiths, powerful, divine craftsmen who were imprisoned deep within the earth by their own fearful father. And it was they who, after being freed by Zeus, would forge his greatest weapons, the thunderbolts. The Cyclopes, then, were creatures of a profound duality. They were both the savage, cannibalistic monster in the cave, and they were the noble, divine artisans who created the very power of the gods themselves. They were a symbol of the earth's raw power, a power that could be both brutally destructive and brilliantly creative. Deep in the green, tangled, and often trackless forests that once covered the vast majority of Europe, a strange and deeply enigmatic figure was said to live. He was not a giant, he was not a monster, he was something in between, something that was both human and yet profoundly not. This was the wild man of the woods, the Woodwoes. The Woodwoes was a creature that haunted the medieval imagination. He was depicted in tapestries, in paintings, in the margins of illuminated manuscripts. He was almost always the same. A man-like creature of normal human size, but covered from head to toe in a thick, shaggy coat of hair, leaving only his hands, his feet, and his face bare. He lived a completely feral, animalistic existence in the deepest, most remote parts of the forest. He carried a large, gnarled club, and he was the undisputed master of his wild domain. The Woodwoes was a creature of profound and deeply unsettling ambiguity. Was he a man who had been lost or abandoned in the woods as a child, and who had grown up without any human contact? Was he a madman, a hermit who had rejected the corrupt world of civilization and had chosen to live a life of pure, natural freedom? Or was he something else entirely? A different species of human, a relict hominid, a missing link that had survived hidden in the deep woods, a living ghost from our own evolutionary past. The wild man was a mirror, a dark and distorted reflection of civilized man. He was everything that the medieval world was not. He was naked, he was unrestrained, he was a creature of pure, instinctual, and often violent passion. He was a symbol of the deep and often fearful fascination that the medieval mind had with the idea of the wild, the untamed, the world beyond the safe, ordered walls of the town and the castle. He was a reminder of the thin and often fragile line that separates the human from the animal, the civilized from the savage. And he was a question that asked, what is a man when you strip away his clothes, his laws, his God? What is left when all you have is the forest and the hunger and the dark? We travel now high into the jagged, snow-capped and deeply mysterious peaks of the European Alps, a mountain range that forms the spine of the continent. And it is here, in the remote, high-altitude meadows and the dark, rocky crevices, that a strange and deeply elusive creature is said to make its home. Its name is the Tatzelwurm. The name, from the German, means claw worm, and it is a brutally descriptive name for a deeply bizarre creature. The Tatzelwurm is, essentially, a European dragon, but a dragon that has been stripped of all its grand, mythological majesty. It is a strange and almost pathetic hybrid creature, a biological absurdity. Eyewitness accounts, which have been reported for centuries by farmers and hikers in the Alps of Switzerland, Austria, and Germany, describe a creature that is about 2 to 3 feet long, with a thick, serpentine or lizard-like body. It has no hind legs, but it has 2 powerful, clawed forelegs at the front of its body, and its head is, most strangely of all, described as being almost identical to that of a cat, with a round face, large eyes, and pointed feline ears. The Tatzelwurm is said to be a highly venomous and incredibly aggressive predator. It will lie in wait in the high grasses or among the rocks, and it will leap out at its victims, attacking with its sharp claws and its poisonous bite. It is also said to be able to let out a high-pitched, whistling or hissing sound. The Tatzelwurm is a classic and deeply fascinating cryptid. It is a creature that seems to exist in the strange, blurry space between folklore and zoology. Is it a genuine, undiscovered species, perhaps a strange and, as yet unknown, variety of legless lizard or salamander, like the American Gila monster? Or is it simply a folk memory, a garbled and deeply exaggerated description of a normal and known animal, like an otter or a marmot, glimpsed for a fleeting, terrifying moment in a strange and unfamiliar environment? The Tatzelwurm remains one of Europe's most charming and most enduring biological mysteries, a small and very angry dragon that is still, perhaps, hiding in the high, lonely places of the world. We descend now from the high peaks of the Alps into the deep, dark, and often deeply drunken forests of Bavaria in southern Germany. And here, in a land of beer halls, of lederhosen, and of a rich and often deeply surreal folklore, we meet a creature that is not a monster to be feared, but a joke to be shared. A creature that is a pure, unadulterated, and deeply beloved product of the art of the taxidermist. This is the Wolpertinger. The Wolpertinger is not a single creature. It is a chimera, a chaotic and often hilarious collage of different animal parts, stitched together into a single, impossible beast. The most common form of the Wolpertinger is described as having the body of a squirrel or a rabbit, the antlers of a deer, and the wings of a pheasant or a duck. But the variations are endless. A Wolpertinger can have the head of a fox, the legs of a stork, the tail of a fish. It is a biological absurdity, a practical joke played by nature herself. The folklore surrounding the Wolpertinger is a part of the joke. The stories say that the creature is very shy and can only be seen by beautiful young women who are willing to venture into the woods on the night of a full moon, accompanied by a strong, right-minded man. This, of course, was just a clever and deeply transparent excuse for a young Bavarian man to try and lure a young woman into the woods for a romantic and probably very drunken evening. The Wolpertinger is a beloved symbol of Bavarian culture. It is a creature that is born from the region's deep connection to the forest, to the hunt, and to a very specific and often very strange sense of humor. You can find stuffed, taxidermied Wolpertingers in almost every inn and tourist shop in Bavaria. It is a monster that is not designed to be feared. It is a monster that is designed to make you laugh and to make you buy another beer. It is a reminder that not all the beasts of the forest are creatures of terror. Some of them are just very, very strange. We return, for a moment, to the high, steep, and often treacherous slopes of the Alps, this time in the French and Swiss regions. And here we meet another creature that is a product, not of ancient terror, but of a deep and deeply playful local humor. This is the Dahu. The Dahu is a creature that is, according to the legend, perfectly and hilariously adapted to its mountainous environment. It is said to be an animal that looks like a deer or a mountain goat, but it has a very specific and very strange anatomical quirk. The legs on one side of its body are shorter than the legs on the other side. This strange, asymmetrical anatomy makes the Dahu a master of the mountainside. It can stand perfectly level on the steepest of slopes, and it can run around the mountain in one direction at an incredible speed. But it has one fatal flaw. It can only ever travel in one direction. If a dahu ever tries to turn around, it will immediately lose its balance and will come tumbling, helplessly, down the mountainside. The story of the dahu is, of course, an elaborate and long-running practical joke, a tall tale that is told by the locals to fool naive and gullible tourists. The traditional method of hunting the dahu involves sending the unsuspecting tourist out onto a steep, dark mountainside at night, armed with a burlap sack. The tourist is told to stand at the bottom of a slope and to make a loud whistling sound. The dahu, the story goes, is a curious creature, and it will turn around to see where the sound is coming from. And in that moment, it will lose its balance, and it will roll, conveniently, right into the tourist's open sack. The dahu is a beloved piece of alpine folklore. It is a creature born of a deep love for the mountains and a deep love for a good and often very silly joke. It is a symbol of the playful trickster spirit of the mountain folk themselves. It is a reminder that the people who live in the highest and most serious of places often have the best and the strangest sense of humor. Our journey through the world of the earthbound giants and the wild men comes to an end in a unique, ancient, and deeply mysterious corner of Europe. We go to the Basque country, a region that straddles the border between France and Spain, a land with its own ancient language and its own deeply unique mythology. And it is here, in the deep pastoral valleys and the dark forested hills, that the Basque people tell stories of their own local and deeply respected wild man. This is the Basajaun. The Basajaun in the Basque language means the Lord of the Woods. And he is exactly that. He is a tall, hairy, and immensely powerful human-like creature who lives in the deepest parts of the forest. He is the protector of the wilderness, and he is the guardian of all the flocks of sheep and cattle that graze in his domain. But unlike the often savage and brutish woodwoes of northern Europe, the Basajaun is not a monster. He is a teacher. He is a benevolent, if sometimes frightening, culture hero. The old Basque legends say that it was the Basajaun who first taught the ancient humans the secrets of civilization. He taught them how to plant seeds, how to forge metal, how to build a mill. He was the original and deeply hairy Prometheus of the Basque people. The stories say that when a storm is coming, the Basajaun will let out a great roaring shout from the high peaks, a warning to the shepherds to bring their flocks down to the safety of the valleys. He is not a creature to be feared. He is a creature to be respected and to be listened to. He is, in a sense, a perfect symbol of the Basque people's own deep and deeply respectful relationship with their own ancient and beautiful land. He is a wild man, yes, but he is a wild man who is also a source of great wisdom, of great power, and of a deep and ultimately protective kindness. He is a reminder that the wilderness is not just a place of danger and of chaos. It is also a place of great knowledge, of great secrets, and of a deep and often very gentle kind of magic. The Basajaun is the ultimate and most noble of all the wild men, a true and very hairy Lord of the Woods. Our hunt begins on the lonely, windswept roads of East Anglia. This is a land of flat horizons, of coastal fogs that roll in from the North Sea, swallowing the world in a blanket of grey. And it is here, in the suffocating darkness of these country lanes, that a traveller might encounter the region's most enduring and terrifying spectre. They call him Black Shuck. The name itself is ancient, believed to be a descendant of the Old English word skukka, meaning demon. And the creature is well named. Eyewitness accounts, stretching back for over 1,000 years, describe a beast of impossible size, a demonic hound as large as a calf or a small horse. Its fur is shaggy, matted, and as black as a starless night. But its most terrifying feature is its eyes. Witnesses consistently describe a single, massive, glowing eye in the center of its head, or sometimes two, burning with the color of hot coals, a malevolent, fiery red that seems to pierce the soul. Black Shuck is not just a passive observer. He is an omen. To see him once is a warning of impending misfortune. To look directly into his burning eyes is a death sentence. The stories say that anyone who does so will die within the year. He is a silent predator, often heard before he is seen, his giant paws making no sound on the gravel of the road. He is the guardian of the liminal spaces, the lonely roads, the ancient churchyards, the coastal paths where the land meets the sea. His most famous and most terrifying appearance was recorded in the year 1577. On the 4th of August, during a violent thunderstorm, the doors of the Holy Trinity Church in Blithborough were thrown open with a crash of thunder, and into the church strode the great black beast. It ran, silently, through the terrified congregation, its presence a whirlwind of demonic energy. It was said to have killed a man and a boy as it passed, their necks wrung as if by a great, unseen force. As it exited, it leaped at the north door, leaving behind deep, scorch-like claw marks in the ancient wood. Those marks, a physical and deeply chilling testament to the demon's visit, can still be seen on the door of the church to this day. He is not just a story. For the people of East Anglia, Black Shuck is a piece of living and very dangerous history. We travel north now to the rugged dales and the ancient, brooding cities of Yorkshire. And here, in the dark, narrow alleyways, the snickle ways, and on the lonely, wind-swept roads that connect the isolated villages, another, and perhaps even more malevolent phantom dog is said to stalk the night. Its name is the Barghest. The Barghest is a creature of a more monstrous and demonic aspect than its southern cousin, Black Shuck. It is not just a large dog, it is a true, shape-shifting monster. It most often appears as a huge, black, wolf-like dog with eyes that burn like fiery saucers. But it is also said to have great, curving horns, like a ram, and long, sharp, tearing claws. And sometimes it will appear not as a dog at all, but as a headless man, a headless woman, a white cat, or even a rabbit. It is a creature of pure, chaotic, and deeply deceptive evil. The Barghest is a creature that is deeply connected to the act of death itself. It is said that the creature will appear on the doorstep of a person who is about to die, and it will let out a single, blood-curdling howl. He is a herald of the grave, and he is a guardian of it. He is often seen in churchyards, and he is believed to be the protector of the unnamed and unconsecrated graves of the outcasts, the suicides, the criminals. To disturb these graves is to incur his wrath. His most famous lair is a lonely limestone gorge known as Troller's Gill. The name itself means the Troll's Ravine. And it is here that the Barghest is said to live, a monstrous, spectral guardian of this ancient and haunted place. The legend says that anyone who looks upon the Barghest of Troller's Gill will be turned to stone. Unlike Black Shuck, who is often a solitary, silent omen, the Barghest is an active, aggressive, and deeply personal predator. He is not just a warning of death, he is, very often, the cause of it. He is the true, demonic, and shape-shifting heart of the phantom dog legend of the North. Our journey now takes us west into the ancient, mountainous, and deeply magical land of Wales. A land of bards, of druids, and of a mythology that is as old and as mysterious as the hills themselves. And it is here, riding on the winds of a winter storm, that you might hear the sound of the most ancient and most otherworldly of all the spectral hounds. You might hear the cry of the Cwn Annwn. The Cwn Annwn, in the Welsh language, means the hounds of Annwn. Annwn was the name of the Welsh otherworld, the deep, magical, and often dangerous realm of the fairies, the Tylwyth Teg. And these were its hunting dogs. They were not creatures of hell, they were not demons. They were the hounds of the fairy king, Gwyn ap Nudd, the lord of the Welsh underworld, and they were the leaders of the wild hunt. The appearance of these hounds is very specific and deeply strange. They are not black. They are a brilliant, shining, spectral white, and their ears are a deep blood red. This strange and deeply symbolic coloration marks them as creatures that are not of our world. They are the colors of the other world, the colors of a realm where the rules of nature do not apply. To hear the cry of the Cwn Annwn was to hear the sound of the wild hunt itself, sweeping across the night sky. The sound of their baying was said to be strangely musical, both beautiful and terrifying at the same time. The closer they were, the softer their cry would become, and the further away they were, the louder it would sound. A deeply disorienting and magical acoustic trick that would lure a lost traveler deeper and deeper into their path. They were not omens of a normal, everyday death. They were the collectors of souls. Their purpose was to hunt down the souls of the wicked, the damned, and to drag them, screaming, back to their master's kingdom in the other world. The Cuan Anwen were not just phantom dogs. They were the beautiful, terrible, and deeply otherworldly hounds of a fairy king, and their hunting ground was the fragile and often terrified soul of man. While the Cuan Anwen were the spectral, otherworldly hunters of the high mythical skies, the land of Wales was also haunted by a more terrestrial, more personal, and far more brutish kind of phantom dog. This was the Gwyllgi. The name, in Welsh, translates to the dog of twilight or the dog of darkness, and it is a fitting name for a creature that is the Welsh equivalent of the English black shuck. The Gwyllgi is a massive, black, and deeply malevolent mastiff-like dog. Its fur is a dark, shaggy mat, and its most terrifying feature is its great, burning, fiery eyes, which are said to glow with a hellish red light in the darkness. It has a breath that is foul and pestilential, and a low, guttural, and deeply menacing growl. The Gwyllgi is a creature of pure, simple, and direct terror. It is not an omen. It is not a collector of souls. It is a guardian, a spectral guard dog of a specific and often very lonely stretch of road. It is a territorial monster. It appears suddenly out of the darkness in the middle of the road, blocking the path of a lone, nocturnal traveler. It will stand there, its great dark form a silent, menacing obstacle, its eyes burning like hot coals, its lips pulled back in a silent snarl. To encounter the Gwyllgi is to be paralyzed with a fear so profound that it can stop your heart. The stories say that the creature has the ability to freeze a man in his tracks with its terrifying gaze, and then it will attack, lunging with a silent and often fatal ferocity. Unlike the more complex and mythical Cuan Anwen, the Gwyllgi is a simple, straightforward, and deeply effective boogeyman. It is a ghost story that is designed to do one thing and one thing only, to keep you from walking the lonely roads of Wales after the sun has gone down. It is the pure, animalistic, and deeply predatory heart of the phantom dog legend. We travel now to the vast, empty, and deeply atmospheric landscape of Dartmoor in the southwest of England. This is a place of rolling, mist-shrouded hills, of strange prehistoric stone circles, and of vast, treacherous bogs that can swallow a man whole. And it is a landscape that is haunted, not just by ghosts and fairies, but by a very specific and very famous pack of phantom dogs. The Hounds of Dartmoor. The stories of a great black and often supernatural dog on Dartmoor are ancient. But the most famous and most enduring of these legends was born not from the whispers of the local peasants, but from the brilliant and deeply atmospheric mind of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. In his most famous Sherlock Holmes story, The Hound of the Baskervilles, he took the raw, local legends of a phantom dog and he wove them into a masterpiece of gothic horror. Doyle created the story of a cursed aristocratic family, the Baskervilles, who were being hunted, generation after generation, by a gigantic, demonic, and seemingly supernatural hound, a creature with a coat that glowed with a hellish, phosphorescent light, and whose ghostly howl could be heard echoing across the misty, moonlit moors. He created a monster that was a perfect, terrifying fusion of ancient folklore and modern, scientific horror. Doyle's genius was to give the story a rational, if deeply sinister, explanation. The hound, in the end, was not a ghost. It was a real and very large dog, a mix of a mastiff and a bloodhound that had been starved, abused, and then covered in a phosphorus-based paint to make it glow in the dark. A clever and terrifying trick used by a human villain to frighten his victim to death. But the story, as so often happens, was more powerful than the explanation. The rational ending of the novel was, for many, forgotten, and the image of a great, glowing and demonic hound stalking the misty, moonlit moors of Dartmoor became a permanent and unkillable part of the local and the global imagination. It is a perfect example of the strange and often wonderful feedback loop between folklore and literature. The local legend inspired the great novel, and the great novel, in turn, breathed a new and far more powerful life into the local legend. Our final hunt takes us not to a specific road or a specific moor, but to the skies themselves. For there is a phantom pack that does not run on the ground. It flies on the winds of the storm. These are the Gabriel Hounds. The Gabriel Hounds are a strange and deeply terrifying English variation of the great pan-European myth of the wild hunt. But these are not the spectral hunters and their dogs of the continental legend. These are something else, something stranger. They are a pack of ghostly and often headless hounds that fly through the night sky, their passing marked by a strange and deeply unsettling sound. The sound of the Gabriel Hounds is not the familiar baying howl of a normal dog. It is described as a strange, unnatural, and deeply human-like noise, like the sound of wailing lost children, or sometimes like the honking of a flock of wild geese. To hear this sound passing overhead in the night is a terrible and deeply personal omen. It is a sign that your own death, or the death of a loved one, is imminent. The hounds are said to be the souls of unbaptized children, doomed to wander the skies until Judgment Day, and their sad, lonely cries are a warning to the living. The name, Gabriel Hounds, is a piece of grim, folk etymological irony. It is a corruption of the older Gabal Rechet, or corpse hounds. The folk, in their fear, tried to sanctify the demonic pack, to give them a holy name, to connect them to the Archangel Gabriel, the great messenger of God. But the attempt does not quite work. The fear of the old, pagan, and deeply terrifying wild hunt is still there, just beneath the surface of the Christian name. The Gabriel Hounds are a beautiful and deeply chilling example of a myth in transition, a creature that is caught between the old world of the pagan gods and the new world of the Christian faith. A creature that is part demon, part angel, and a terrifying and deeply personal messenger of a death that is coming for you, not on the lonely roads below, but from the dark and starless skies above. We journey now into the vast, ancient, and seemingly endless forests of Russia, a wilderness so immense it feels less like a place on Earth and more like a green, silent ocean. And in this ocean, a powerful, ancient, and deeply ambivalent king is said to rule. He is not a god, he is not a demon, he is the forest itself, given a human-like form. This is the Leshy. The Leshy is a spirit of profound and terrifying power. He is the absolute master of the forest. All the animals are his cattle, all the trees his subjects. He is a shapeshifter, and his appearance is as wild and as unpredictable as the woods themselves. He can appear as a normal peasant man, but with strange glowing green eyes and a beard made of living grass and vines. He can also change his size at will. When he walks in the deep, old-growth parts of the forest, he can grow as tall as the highest trees, a towering green giant. And when he moves into the meadows at the forest's edge, he can shrink to the size of a single blade of grass, becoming completely invisible. He is a trickster, a deeply chaotic and amoral being. His laughter, a sound like the rustling of 1,000 leaves, can be heard echoing through the trees. He is known to delight in leading travelers astray, to change the paths, to mimic the voices of loved ones, to lure the unwary deeper and deeper into the forest until they are hopelessly, and often fatally, lost. But the Leshy is not purely evil. He is a guardian. He is the protector of the forest and its creatures, a hunter who shows respect, who only takes what he needs, who honors the old ways, might be rewarded by the Leshy, who will lead him to a rich and bountiful hunting ground. But a hunter who is greedy, who is cruel, who kills for sport, will incur the Leshy's wrath. And that wrath is a terrible thing. The Leshy will lead him in circles until he dies of exhaustion, or he will tickle him to death, a strange and deeply unsettling form of natural justice. The Leshy is the soul of the forest itself, a place of great beauty and of great danger, a place that can sustain you, but that can just as easily and with the same indifferent, rustling laughter swallow you whole. We travel west to the dark and deeply grim forests of Germany and the Alpine regions. And here we meet a creature that is a close and often far more malevolent cousin of the Russian Leshy. This is the Shrat. The Shrat is a wild, hairy, and often monstrous spirit of the forest, a creature that is deeply rooted in the old, pre-Christian, pagan beliefs of the Germanic peoples. He is often described as a hairy, dwarf-like or giant-like being, his body covered in moss and leaves, his face a gnarled and ancient mask. He is a creature of the deep, untouched wilderness, a symbol of the raw, untamed, and often deeply hostile power of nature. Like the leshy, the Shrat is a shapeshifter and a trickster, but his tricks are rarely, if ever, harmless. He is a creature of pure, malicious intent. He will lead travelers astray, not for amusement, but with the specific goal of leading them to their doom, over a cliff or into a deep, dark ravine. He is a bringer of disease, of misfortune, of all the strange, unseen sicknesses that the forest can inflict upon a man. But the Shrat is most famous and most feared for its nocturnal activities. It is a creature that is closely related to the Alp and the Mara, the nightmare demons of Germanic folklore. The Shrat is known to creep silently into the homes of sleeping villagers, and it will sit on their chests, a heavy, hairy, and suffocating weight, pressing the breath from their bodies and inflicting them with terrifying, nightmarish visions. It is a creature that can move seamlessly between the outer world of the forest and the inner world of the human mind. The Shrat is a terrifying and deeply unpleasant reminder that the dark, chaotic, and dangerous power of the wilderness is not something that you can simply lock out by barring your door. Sometimes it comes inside, and it comes for you in your sleep. Our journey takes us now to the far southwestern tip of England, to the ancient, windswept, and deeply storied land of Cornwall. And here, in the shadows of the old, prehistoric stone circles and the crumbling ruins of forgotten castles, we find a creature that is the perfect and deeply unpleasant embodiment of the dark, mischievous, and often deeply malevolent side of the fairy world. These are the Spriggans. The Spriggans are a type of goblin or pixie, but they are not the playful, harmless tricksters of some other tales. They are a race of ancient, wizened, and deeply ugly creatures. And they are, for the most part, pure, unadulterated evil. They are believed to be the ghosts of the old, pre-Christian giants of Cornwall, their immense, powerful spirits now trapped in these small, twisted, and ugly forms. And they are the self-appointed guardians of the ancient and often buried treasures of the land. They haunt the old stone circles, the ancient burial mounds, the crumbling ruins of the old castles. And they will viciously, and often fatally, attack any human who is foolish enough to try and dig for the lost treasures of the Cornish kings. The Spriggans are shapeshifters, and they have the ability to swell to an immense, gigantic size, their ugly, goblin-like features becoming a terrifying, monstrous mask of pure, giant-sized rage. They are also known to be the most notorious of all the baby snatchers of the fairy world. They will creep into human homes at night, and they will steal a healthy human baby from its cradle, leaving in its place a sickly, wizened, and constantly screaming changeling, a Spriggan child that will bring nothing but misery and eventually ruin to the human family that is now forced to raise it. The Spriggans are the ultimate and most terrifying of all the fairy tricksters. They are a creature of pure, chaotic, and deeply destructive malice. They are a final and deeply chilling reminder that the world of the fairies is not a world of children's stories and happy endings. It is a world that is ancient, that is powerful, that is deeply and profoundly alien to our own. And it is a world that does not, in any way, wish us well. We step now from the world of the active, malevolent goblin to the world of the quiet and deeply enigmatic symbol. We enter the cool, silent, and sacred space of the old medieval churches of England, and here, hidden in the intricate stone carvings of the pillars, in the dark wooden bosses of the ceilings, we find a strange and deeply unsettling face staring back at us, a face that seems to be made entirely of leaves. This is the Green Man. He is one of the most mysterious and most persistent images in all of European art and folklore. His face is human, but it is a face that is in the process of a profound and deeply strange transformation. Leaves, vines, and branches are shown growing from his mouth, his nose, his ears, his eyes. He is a man who is becoming a plant, a human being who is being consumed and reborn as a part of the green, vegetative world. Who is he? What does he represent? The truth is, we do not know. He is a mystery. He has no name, no story, no mythology attached to him. He is simply there. A silent, leafy, and deeply enigmatic presence, staring down at the Christian congregation from the very heart of their own sacred spaces. The scholars believe that he is a symbol of rebirth, of the cyclical nature of life, of the coming of spring after the long, cold death of winter. But for many, he is a ghost, a pagan ghost, a survivor. He is believed to be a remnant of a much older pre-Christian religion, the face of an ancient Celtic or Germanic nature god, a god of the forest, like Cernunnos, the horned god. A god who was so powerful, so deeply ingrained in the spiritual consciousness of the people, that the new Christian religion could not completely eradicate him. And so, they absorbed him. They gave him a small, quiet, and largely hidden place within their own churches, a secret, silent acknowledgement of the older, wilder powers that still held sway over the land. The Green Man is a symbol of a deep and often uncomfortable truth. He is a reminder that our own human world is a thin, fragile veneer laid over a much older, much wilder, and much more powerful reality. He is the face of the forest, and he is a silent and ever-present reminder that the wildness we have tried so hard to conquer is not just outside our walls, it is inside them, and it is inside us. We journey now to the deep, silent, and often breathtakingly beautiful forests of Sweden, and here, in the green, dappled twilight of the ancient pines, a creature of a profound and deeply dangerous, seductive power is said to live. She is the roe of the forest, the warden, the spirit, the ruler. She is the skogsrå. The skogsrå, or the huldra in Norway, is a forest spirit, a creature that appears as a stunningly, supernaturally beautiful woman. She will appear to a lone hunter or a charcoal burner, a man who has ventured deep into the woods, far from the safety of his village. She is a creature of pure, irresistible allure, but there is always something wrong, something deeply and unnervingly other about her. The telltale sign of the skogsrå is her back. From the front, she is a perfect, beautiful woman. But if you can catch a glimpse of her from behind, you will see that her back is not the smooth skin of a human. It is the rough, gnarled, and often hollowed-out bark of an old tree. And she has a tail. Sometimes it is the long, bushy tail of a fox, other times the hairy, tufted tail of a cow, which she desperately tries to hide beneath her skirts. She is a creature of a deep and often tragic duality. She can be benevolent. A man who is kind to her, who respects her and her forest, might be rewarded with good hunting luck for the rest of his life. And she can fall in love with a human man, becoming a loyal and loving, if deeply secretive, wife. But if that man is ever cruel to her, if he ever breaks his faith with her, her revenge is swift and terrible. And she can also be a predator. She will use her supernatural beauty to lure a man deeper and deeper into the forest until he is hopelessly lost. And then she will abandon him, leaving him to die of starvation and exposure. Or, in the darkest of the tales, she will drain him of his life force, leaving behind a withered, empty husk of a man, his soul now a permanent and silent resident of her dark and deeply lonely forest kingdom. She is the beautiful and deeply dangerous soul of the forest itself. In the neighboring and equally wild forests and mountains of Norway, the skogsrå has a very close and equally seductive cousin. This is the huldra. The huldra is a member of the huldra folk, the hidden people, a race of powerful and deeply secretive nature spirits. And like the Swedish skogsrå, she is a creature of a dangerous and deceptive beauty. She appears as a beautiful young woman, often with long, flowing golden hair, and she is often seen herding her strange, otherworldly cattle in the high mountain pastures. She will try to lure a human man, a shepherd or a hunter, into her world, into her mountain home, with the promise of love, of wealth, of a life of ease. But the huldra, like her Swedish cousin, has a secret. She has a telltale physical mark of her otherness. In the Norwegian tradition, it is almost always the long, hairy tail of a cow. She is a creature that is caught between two worlds, the human and the animal, the beautiful and the slightly grotesque. The stories of the huldra are often tales of a deep and ultimately tragic loneliness. She is a creature who seems to desperately want to be a part of the human world, to experience human love. And if a man marries a huldra in a church, the old tales say, her cow's tail will fall off and she will become a mortal human woman. But she will lose all of her otherworldly beauty, and she will gain a strange and almost supernatural physical strength and an often very foul temper. The Huldra is a complex and deeply sympathetic figure. She is not a simple monster. She is a creature of longing, a symbol of the deep and often painful desire to cross the border, to bridge the gap between the wild, magical world of the spirit and the solid, mundane, and often deeply disappointing world of the human. We travel now from the cool, dark forests to the bright, hot, and open fields of Poland and the Slavic lands. And here, in the shimmering, hazy heat of the midday sun, a very different and very dangerous kind of spirit is said to walk. She is a creature of the sun, of the heat, of the moment of the day when the world seems to stand still. She is the Poludnitsa, the Lady Midday. The Poludnitsa is the vengeful spirit of a young woman who died on her wedding day, or a woman who died in the heat of the summer fields. She appears at noon, the one time of day when it was considered deeply unwise and even dangerous to be working in the fields. She manifests as a beautiful young woman, dressed all in white, her hair the color of the sun-bleached wheat. She seems to float over the fields, a shimmering heat-haze mirage, and she is a killer. She will approach any poor, unfortunate farm worker who is foolish enough to be out in the midday sun, and she will engage them in a conversation. She will ask them difficult and often deeply personal questions about their life, about their work, about their faith. And if they fail to answer her questions correctly, or if they show any sign of disrespect, her beautiful face will contort into a mask of pure, ancient rage, and she will attack them. Sometimes she will simply strike them dead with a single, magical blow, a form of supernatural sunstroke. Other times she will drive them mad, her presence a form of psychic, heat-induced delirium. And in the most gruesome of the tales, she will cut off their heads with the sickle that she carries in her hand. The Poludnitsa is a powerful and deeply practical piece of folklore. She is a supernatural explanation for a very real and very mundane danger. The danger of sunstroke, of heat exhaustion, of working too hard in the deadly heat of the midday sun. She is a ghost story that is designed to enforce a simple and very sensible rule of agricultural life. At noon, you rest. You find shade, you do not work. Or the beautiful and very deadly Lady Midday will come for you. We return now to the far northern and deeply magical islands of Shetland, a place where the folklore of the Norse and the Celtic worlds have met and mingled for centuries. And it is here, in the ancient prehistoric burial mounds, the Nose, that a race of small, ugly, and deeply mischievous creatures is said to live. These are the Trows. The Trows are the Shetlandic version of the Scandinavian trolls, but they are not the great lumbering giants of the Norwegian mountains. They are small, stooped, and often grotesquely ugly creatures who live a secret, subterranean existence deep inside the hollow hills. They are nocturnal creatures, and they only come out into the human world at night to cause mischief and, sometimes, to steal. They are particularly famous for their love of music and for their skill as fiddle players. A human fiddler who was foolish enough to fall asleep near a Traunoe might be lured down into their world, and he would be forced to play for them for a night and a day. But in the world of the Trows, time moves differently, and when the fiddler finally returned to the human world, he would find that 100 years had passed, and that everyone he had ever known and loved was long dead. The Trows were also notorious for their desire for human women, and for their habit of stealing babies. They would creep into a house at night, and they would take a healthy human child from its cradle, leaving in its place one of their own, sickly and perpetually whining children, a changeling. The Trows were a constant and often deeply annoying presence in the lives of the Shetlandic people. They had to be appeased with offerings of milk and bread, and the people had to be constantly on their guard against the Trows' mischievous and often deeply dangerous tricks. They are a perfect example of the little people of the folklore, a race of supernatural beings who are not quite gods and not quite demons, but who are a constant and often very troublesome part of the magical landscape of the everyday world. We journey now to the most remote, most geologically active, and most magically potent of all the Nordic lands, Iceland. This is a landscape that is still being born, a world of volcanoes, of glaciers, of bubbling mud pots, and of vast, empty plains of black, volcanic rock. And in this strange and often deeply alien landscape, an entire, invisible, and very powerful race of beings is said to live. These are the Huldufolk, the hidden people. The Huldufolk, or the elves as they are sometimes called, are not the small winged pixies of English folklore. They are a race of supernatural beings that are, in almost every way, identical to human beings. They live in a world that is parallel to our own, a world that is hidden inside the great, strange, and often moss-covered lava rocks that dot the Icelandic landscape. They live in their own invisible farms and villages. They raise their own invisible livestock. They go to their own invisible churches. They are, in essence, a perfect and completely hidden mirror image of the human world itself. And for the most part, the relationship between the humans and the hidden people is a peaceful, if deeply respectful, one of coexistence. The Icelanders know that the Huldufolk are there, and they know that you must not, under any circumstances, disturb their homes. This is not just a quaint piece of folklore. It is a belief that is so powerful, so deeply ingrained in the national consciousness, that it has a very real and often very expensive impact on the modern world. Roads in Iceland have been rerouted at great expense to avoid a large rock that is believed to be a sacred elf home or an elf church. Construction projects have been halted because the workers and their heavy machinery have been plagued by a series of strange and often dangerous accidents, which are universally believed to be the work of the angry and now very much not hidden Huldufolk. The hidden people are a profound and powerful symbol of the Icelandic people's own deep and deeply respectful relationship with their own strange, beautiful, and often very dangerous land. They are a reminder that we are not the only and perhaps not even the most important inhabitants of this world, and that there are older and more powerful forces at play, forces that we must respect and that we disturb at our own very great peril. We travel now to the wild, mountainous, and deeply passionate lands of the Balkans, and here, in the high mountain meadows, in the deep forests, and by the lonely, hidden springs, a race of beautiful, powerful, and often deadly female nature spirits is said to live. These are the Vila. The Vila are, in some ways, similar to the Greek nymphs or the Celtic fairies. They are stunningly, supernaturally beautiful women with long, flowing golden hair and dressed in white, ethereal robes. They are the spirits of the mountains, of the forests, of the clouds, of the water, and they are fierce and often violent, protectors of their own natural domain. They are possessed of a number of magical abilities. They are great healers, and they have a deep and often prophetic knowledge of the future. They are also great warriors, and they will sometimes choose to aid a human hero in his battles, much like the Valkyries of the Norse myths. But they have a dark and deeply dangerous side. They are incredibly proud, and they are quick to anger. A man who spies on them while they are dancing in their sacred moonlit circles, or who breaks a promise to them, will be punished with a terrible and often fatal severity. They can strike a man blind with a single, angry glance. They can drive him mad with their enchanting and deeply magical songs. Or, in the most extreme cases, they can force him to dance with them, an ecstatic and ultimately fatal dance that will not end until the man's heart bursts from exhaustion. The Vila are a perfect embodiment of the wild and often dangerous beauty of the Balkan landscape itself. They are a force that can be both nurturing and destructive, both a source of great healing power and of a sudden and often very violent death. To encounter a Vila is to come face to face with the beautiful and very deadly soul of the wilderness. We return to the dark and deeply treacherous world of the Scottish fairies, but this time we do not speak of the individual tricksters or the lonely spirits. We speak of an entire kingdom, a nation, a court. We speak of the dark and deeply malevolent side of the fairy world. We speak of the unseelie court. The fairies of Scottish folklore were divided into two great and eternally warring factions. There was the Seelie court, the blessed or holy court. These were the fairies who were, for the most part, benevolent or at least indifferent to human beings. They were the beautiful, aristocratic, and often helpful fairies of the high, noble tradition. And then there was their dark and terrifying shadow. The Unseelie Court. These were the fairies of pure, unadulterated malice. They were the goblins, the bogles, the monstrous and the deformed. They were the spirits of the restless dead, the fallen angels who had been cast out of heaven, but who were deemed not evil enough for hell. And they were ruled by a powerful and deeply terrifying queen. The Unseelie Court was a force of pure, destructive chaos. They were most active during the dark winter months, and they would ride out from their dark, subterranean kingdom in a great and terrible host, a procession that was known as the Horde. This was, in essence, the fairy version of the Wild Hunt, and to be caught in its path was to be swept away, your soul now a permanent and unwilling member of their dark and eternally malevolent army. The Unseelie Court were the slavers, the tormentors, the bogeymen of the fairy world. They were the ones who would steal babies from their cradles. They were the ones who would inflict strange, wasting diseases upon the livestock and the children of the human world. They were a reminder that the world of the fairies was not a world of light and of wonder. It was a world of a deep and often very brutal and very political form of a cold and very magical war. And humanity was often just the unfortunate and very fragile battlefield. We journey now deep into the vast, snow-covered and deeply enchanted forests of ancient Russia, and here, in a small, dark and impossibly strange hut that stands on a pair of giant, scaly chicken legs, lives the most famous, most powerful and most deeply ambiguous of all the witches in European folklore. She is not just a witch, she is a force of nature. She is Baba Yaga. Baba Yaga is a creature of a profound and terrifying contradiction. She is not a simple, cackling villain. She is an ancient, elemental power, a being that is older than the forest itself. She is depicted as a ferocious and often grotesque old woman. Her nose is long and bony, her teeth are made of iron, and she is so tall that when she lies down in her hut, her nose touches the ceiling. She does not walk. She flies, not on a broomstick, but in a great black magical mortar, which she steers with a pestle, sweeping away her tracks behind her with a silver birch broom. Her hut is a character in itself. It is a living, sentient thing. It can walk, it can run, and it can spin on its great chicken legs. It is surrounded by a fence that is made of human bones, and the fence posts are topped with human skulls whose empty eye sockets glow with a strange and deeply menacing inner fire in the dead of night. To encounter Baba Yaga is to be given a test. She is the great and often deadly gatekeeper of the Russian fairy tale. A hero or a heroine lost in the deep woods will often stumble upon her hut, and she will ask them in her rasping, ancient voice, "Do you come of your own free will or by compulsion?" And upon their answer, their fate will hang. She may be a terrifying, cannibalistic monster who will try to cook and eat the hero in her great, fiery oven. Or, if the hero is brave, pure of heart, and shows her the proper respect, she can be a powerful and deeply necessary magical ally. She is a being of immense and ancient wisdom. She knows the secrets of life and of death. She can provide the hero with a magical horse, a self-cutting sword, the very thing they need to complete their quest. She is both the villain and the wise woman, the monster and the magical helper. She is the wild, untamed, and deeply amoral power of the forest itself, a power that can destroy you, or that can grant you the wisdom to save yourself. From the deep, snow-covered forests of Russia, we travel to a much smaller, but no less terrifying place of darkness. We go to the city of Leicester in the English Midlands, and we go to a strange and now largely forgotten landmark known as the Dane Hills. It is here, in a dark, damp cave, that she is said to have clawed out of the soft sandstone with her own iron-like talons, that one of England's most terrifying and most brutally cannibalistic of all hags is said to have made her home. Her name is Black Annis. Black Annis is a creature of pure, blue-skinned and child-eating horror. She is described as a monstrous old crone with a single, burning and deeply malevolent eye. Her face is a deathly bluish-white color, and her mouth is a rictus of long, sharp, and very real teeth. And her most terrifying feature is her hands. Her hands end not in fingers, but in long, sharp, and vicious iron claws, which she uses to dig her burrow and to tear the flesh from her victims. She is a creature of the night. She would leave her cave after dark and she would prowl the lonely countryside and even the very streets of Leicester itself, sniffing the air, searching for her favorite prey, children and lambs. She would snatch them up and she would carry them, screaming, back to her dark and filthy lair, and there she would flay them. She would peel the skin from their small bodies and she would tan their hides, hanging them out to dry on the branches of the great, ancient oak tree that stood at the entrance to her cave. And then she would devour them, her sharp teeth crunching on their small, delicate bones. The legend of Black Annis was so powerful, so deeply ingrained in the local consciousness that for centuries the parents of Leicester would use her name as a threat to frighten their children into obedience. "Be good," they would say, "or Black Annis will get you." The cave where she was said to live, Black Annis's bower, was a place of genuine and profound local terror. The scholars believe that she is a folk memory of a much older, pre-Christian goddess, a powerful and once revered deity of the winter and of death, who, with the coming of Christianity, was demonized, her sacred stories twisted and transformed into the horrific folktale of a child-eating hag. Black Annis is a terrifying ghost of a forgotten religion, a reminder that behind every children's boogeyman there is often a dead and very powerful God. We return now to the deep, dark and deeply enchanted forests of Romania, and here, in a world that is already populated by the Strigoi and the Moroi, another and perhaps even more ancient female power is said to rule. She is not a simple witch, she is the mother of the forest itself, she is Muma Paduri. The name translates literally to Mother of the Forest, and she is exactly that. She is a powerful and deeply ambivalent nature spirit, a Romanian cousin to the Russian Baba Yaga. She is the absolute ruler of the wild, untamed places, and her appearance is as wild and as terrifying as the forest she commands. She is often described as an ugly, old, and gnarled woman, her body sometimes covered in the bark of a tree, her hair made of tangled vines. She is a creature that is in a constant state of transformation, blurring the line between the human and the plant. She is a terrifying and deeply dangerous figure. She is the sworn enemy of all woodcutters and of anyone who would seek to harm her forest. And she is a notorious kidnapper of children. She will steal a human child who has wandered too far from the village, and she will take them back to her hidden home in the heart of the forest. And there, she will enslave them. But she is not a creature of pure, simple evil. Like Baba Yaga, she is a keeper of a deep and ancient wisdom. She has the power to heal any sickness, and she has the power to speak the language of all the animals of the forest. And a hero who is brave enough and respectful enough to seek her out may be rewarded with her magical aid. She is also, in a strange and deeply paradoxical way, a protector of children. While she is known to steal them, she is also the great enemy of the Isle, the beautiful but deadly female fairies of Romanian folklore. The Muma Paduri will often fight and defeat the Aiele, protecting the human world from their malevolent influence. She is a complex, contradictory and deeply powerful figure, a true and very wild mother of the forest. We journey now to the ancient, sun-drenched and deeply magical world of classical Greece, and here, in the dark and often dangerous, spaces that existed just outside the well-lit world of the rational Greek mind, a specific and deeply terrifying kind of female demon was said to lurk. This was the Empusa. The Empusa were a category of supernatural shape-shifting monster who were in the service of the great and deeply terrifying goddess of witchcraft and the crossroads, Hecate. They were creatures of the night, and they were, first and foremost, predators of men. An Empusa would often appear to a lone male traveler on a dark and lonely road, and she would appear in the form of a stunningly, supernaturally beautiful woman. She would use her beauty, her charm, her seductive power to lure the man into her embrace. And then, at the moment of his greatest vulnerability, she would reveal her true and deeply monstrous form. Her beautiful face would contort into a hideous, demonic visage, and her body would transform. One of her legs was said to be that of a donkey, and the other a leg made of solid bronze. She was a creature of a deep and deeply unsettling asymmetry, and she was a monster of a ravenous and very specific hunger. She was a creature that fed on the flesh and drank the blood of her lovers. She was a vampiric, cannibalistic demon, a supernatural femme fatale, a creature that was a walking, talking, and deeply terrifying cautionary tale about the dangers of a woman's seductive and potentially deadly power. In the ancient Greek world, the Empusa was not the only female demon to stalk the night. There was another, even more tragic, and in many ways, even more terrifying creature. A monster that was born not of a demonic nature, but of a mother's profound and inconsolable grief. This was the Lamia. The story of the Lamia is a tragedy. She was once a beautiful, mortal queen of Libya who became one of the many lovers of the god Zeus. But Zeus's wife, the proud and deeply jealous goddess Hera, discovered the affair. And her revenge was swift, and it was terrible. Hera, in her rage, murdered all of Lamia's children. Lamia, her mind shattered by this unimaginable grief, was transformed into a monster. Her beautiful face was twisted into a mask of pure, sorrowful rage, and she was cursed with a terrible and deeply unnatural hunger, a hunger for the flesh of other people's children. The Lamia became a nocturnal, child-eating monster, a supernatural boogeyman that Greek mothers would use to frighten their own children into obedience. She would creep into homes at night, and she would steal a sleeping child from its cradle, and she would devour it. She was a creature that was a living, breathing embodiment of a mother's worst and most primal fear, the loss of a child. But the gods, in a rare moment of pity, gave her one small and deeply strange gift. They gave her the ability to remove her own eyes. She could take them out, and she could put them back in. This, the story says, was so that she could find some small, temporary relief from her eternal torment, so that she would not have to constantly see the ghostly images of her own dead children. The Lamia is one of the most tragic and most terrifying of all the ancient monsters, a creature whose own profound and deeply human sorrow has transformed her into an inhuman and deeply sorrowful monster. We travel now to the marshlands, the rivers and the swamps of rural Poland, and here, in the wet and often deeply treacherous spaces between the land and the water, a race of mischievous and often deeply malevolent female spirits is said to live. These are the Boginki. The Boginki, or the little goddesses of the bog, were a species of fairy or nature spirit. They were often described as ugly, old and hairy women with long pendulous breasts that they would use to wash their laundry. They were wild, untamed and deeply connected to the natural world, and they were notorious and deeply feared for one specific and terrifying habit. They were baby stealers. The Boginki were believed to be deeply envious of human mothers, and they would often creep into a village at night, and they would steal a newborn human baby from its cradle. And in its place, they would leave one of their own children, a creature that was known as an odmieniec, a changeling. The changeling was a sickly, ugly, and perpetually screaming creature with a huge abdomen and a tiny, wizened body that would bring nothing but bad luck and eventually ruin to the human family that was now forced by a terrible, supernatural trick to raise it as their own. The Boginki are a perfect and deeply unpleasant example of the darker, more malevolent, and deeply anti-human side of the fairy world. We return to the peasant homes of Slavic folklore to meet a female spirit who is not a creature of the wild, but a creature of the house itself. She is a close and often far more malevolent cousin of the domovoi, the male house spirit. She is the Kikimora. The Kikimora is a small, female, and often deeply troublesome household spirit. And like so many of the creatures of Slavic folklore, she has a dual nature. There is a good Kikimora, one who is married to the domovoi, who lives behind the stove, and who will, if she is happy, help the housewife with her chores, rocking the cradle of the baby at night, and magically cleaning the pots and pans. But there is also a bad Kikimora, a Kikimora who is not married to the domovoi and who lives in the swamp. This Kikimora can be brought into a house by a disgruntled builder or a sorcerer, and she will be a source of endless and often deeply dangerous trouble. She will tangle the housewife's needlework. She will break the dishes. She will make strange whistling and clicking sounds in the night. And she is known to be particularly dangerous to the men of the house. She will come to them at night in a form that is part woman, part bird, and she will try to pluck the hair from their heads. The Kikimora is a perfect and deeply domestic embodiment of the idea that the home itself can be a place of a strange and often deeply inexplicable form of a haunting. We journey now into the dark and often deeply moralistic world of the German fairy tales as they were collected by the brothers Grimm. And here we meet a witch who is not a complex, ambiguous figure like Baba Yaga. She is a creature of pure, simple, and deeply terrifying evil. Her name is Frau Trude. The story of Frau Trude is a short, brutal, and deeply effective cautionary tale about the dangers of curiosity and disobedience. A young and very stubborn little girl is told by her parents that she must not, under any circumstances, go to the house of Frau Trude because she is a wicked, godless woman. But the little girl, of course, disobeys. She goes to Frau Trude's house, and she is met with a series of terrifying, surreal, and deeply symbolic visions. She sees a black man on the stairs, a green man, a blood-red man, and then she sees Frau Trude herself. But Frau Trude looks, the girl says, like the devil himself, with a head of fire. Frau Trude, with a cruel smile, tells the little girl that she has seen the witch in her proper costume. And then she uses her magic to turn the disobedient little girl into a block of wood, and she throws the block of wood onto the fire. That gives a bright light, the witch says, with a final and deeply chilling cackle. The story of Frau Trude is a simple and deeply terrifying piece of psychological warfare, a story designed by parents to frighten their children into absolute and unquestioning obedience. Our journey through the world of the witches and the hags comes to a final and deeply terrifying end in the mountainous lands of the Balkans, and in particular in the folklore of the South Slavic peoples. And here, we meet a creature who is, in many ways, the ultimate and most terrifying of all the nursery bogeymen. She is the Balkan equivalent of Baba Yaga, but she is a creature that has been stripped of all of her ambiguity, of all of her potential for wisdom and for help. She is a creature of pure, simple, and child-eating evil. Her name is Baba Roga. The name literally means the horned old woman. And she is exactly that. She is a hideous old hag with a single, long, and often grotesque horn growing from the center of her forehead. She is a creature of the darkness. She lives in a dark cave, or in the dark, forgotten corners of a child's own bedroom, in the closet, under the bed. And her purpose is simple. She is a supernatural enforcer of childhood discipline. She comes for the children who do not eat their dinner, who do not go to sleep on time, who do not listen to their parents. And she does not just frighten them, she takes them. She will snatch them up in the middle of the night, and she will carry them off to her dark cave, where she will, it is implied, devour them. Baba Roga is the ultimate and most terrifying of all the bogeymen. She is not a complex mythological figure. She is a pure, unadulterated, and deeply effective tool of parental control. She is a story that has been used for centuries to ensure that the children of the Balkans are, if nothing else, very, very well behaved. She is the monster under the bed, the creature in the closet, the horned and very hungry face of a child's worst and most primal nightmare. We step now from the vast, dark, and dangerous world of the wilderness and into a space that is, in many ways, even more haunted. A space that is smaller, more intimate, and far more personal. We step across the threshold into the home itself. For in the old folklore of Europe, the house was not just a building of wood and stone. It was a living entity, a kingdom in miniature. And every kingdom has its king, its guardian, its resident spirit. In the peasant homes of old Russia, that spirit was known as the domovoi. The domovoi, the he of the house, was the soul of the home, the protector of the family. He was a small, ancient, and often very hairy old man with a long grey beard. He lived in the warmest, darkest, and most important part of the house, behind the great earthen stove, which was the literal and spiritual heart of the peasant home. He was, for the most part, an invisible presence, a quiet, watchful guardian who only came out at night to perform his duties. If a family was respectful, if they kept their home clean and their lives orderly, if they did not curse or fight, the domovoi would be a powerful and benevolent ally. He would help with the chores. He would guard the livestock from sickness and from thieves. He would warn the family of impending disaster, often by making a strange, creaking or knocking sound in the night. And he was particularly fond of the family's animals, often spending his nights in the barn, braiding the manes of the horses and feeding them oats. But the domovoi was a creature of a deep and often very dangerous duality. He was a protector, but he was also a strict and often very cruel disciplinarian. If a family was lazy, if their home was messy, if they were disrespectful to him, his benevolence would curdle into a pure and deeply personal malice. He would become a poltergeist. He would hide objects. He would break dishes. He would make strange, terrifying noises in the night. And he would torment the family's animals, tangling the horses' manes into painful knots and driving the cattle from the barn into the cold winter night. To anger the domovoi was to turn your own protective house spirit into your own personal and deeply intimate tormentor. He was a constant and often very demanding reminder that a home is more than just a shelter. It is a living, breathing relationship. A relationship between a family and the ancient, hairy, and very, very particular old man who lived behind the stove. We travel now to the rugged, misty, and deeply enchanted landscape of Scotland and the north of England. And here, in the old stone farmhouses and the lonely rural estates, another, and often far more benevolent, kind of household spirit is said to live. This is the brownie. The brownie is a small, hairy, and often shabbily dressed goblin-like creature. He is the Scottish equivalent of the Russian domovoi, a solitary and deeply helpful household spirit. He is a nocturnal creature, and he only comes out at night after the human family has gone to bed, and he comes out to work. If a brownie has chosen to attach himself to a particular family, he will become their secret and deeply efficient housekeeper. He will finish the chores that the human servants have left undone. He will churn the butter, he will sweep the floors, he will thresh the corn in the barn. He is a creature of a deep and almost obsessive work ethic, and he asks for very little in return. The traditional payment for a brownie's services was a simple bowl of milk or cream, or a small honey-covered cake left by the hearth for him at night. This was not a payment, it was a gift, a gesture of respect. To offer the brownie clothes, or to try and pay him with money, was considered a grave insult. It would break the magical and deeply personal bond between the family and the spirit. And the brownie, his feelings deeply hurt, would vanish forever, leaving the family to do their own tedious chores. But for all his helpfulness, the brownie was still a fairy, a creature of the other world, and he had a mischievous and sometimes deeply malevolent side. If he felt he had been slighted or disrespected, he could, like the domovoi, turn into a boggart, a destructive and terrifying poltergeist who would torment the family and undo all the good work he had once performed. The brownie is a beautiful and deeply charming piece of folklore. He is a symbol of the magical and often very fragile relationship between a family and their home. And he is a reminder that the greatest and most magical of all gifts is not one of money, but one of a simple and deeply appreciated bowl of cream left by a warm and welcoming fire. We journey now across the channel to the fields and the farmhouses of rural France, and here we meet a household spirit that is, in many ways, the most playful, the most mischievous, and the most deeply and unapologetically annoying of all the European house goblins. This is the lutin. The lutin is the French cousin of the brownie, but he has none of the brownie's quiet, diligent, and helpful nature. The lutin is a creature of pure, chaotic, and often deeply frustrating mischief. He is a small, goblin-like or sometimes gnome-like creature who is an expert shapeshifter. He will often appear as a small, human-like boy with a pointed red cap. But he can also take the form of an animal, a cat, a dog, a horse, or he can become completely invisible. The lutin is, first and foremost, a trickster. He delights in playing small and often deeply irritating pranks on the human family whose home he shares. He will tie the shoelaces of the farmer together. He will hide the housewife's keys. He will sour the milk. He will tangle the yarn of the spinners. His goal is not to cause real, lasting harm. His goal is to create chaos, to disrupt the orderly, everyday world of the humans, purely for the sake of his own inscrutable and deeply childish amusement. But his most famous and most troublesome trick is his love for horses. A lutin who has taken up residence in a farmer's stable will become a true and often deeply damaging pest. He will ride the horses at night, taking them on wild breakneck gallops across the countryside, returning them to the stable in the morning, exhausted and covered in a strange, sweaty lather. And he will spend hours with his small, nimble fingers, tangling the manes and the tails of the horses into a series of intricate and often impossible to undo knots, which were known as elf-locks. The lutin is a perfect and deeply frustrating embodiment of the idea that not all supernatural beings are grand, terrifying forces of good or evil. Some of them are just annoying. He is the spirit of the small, inexplicable, and deeply frustrating things that go wrong in the course of an ordinary day. We return to the dark and often deeply malevolent folklore of the north of England. And here, in the lonely farmhouses and the dark, treacherous marshlands, we meet the dark and deeply unpleasant shadow of the helpful Scottish brownie. This is the boggart. A boggart is a household spirit that has turned bad. It is either a brownie that has been insulted and has become a vengeful, malevolent creature, or it is a spirit that was, from the very beginning, a creature of pure, unadulterated malice. The boggart is not a trickster, he is a tormentor. He is a domestic poltergeist, a creature that is dedicated to a single, terrifying purpose: to make the lives of the human family who live in his house a living hell. He will hide in the darkest, most unused parts of the house, the closets, the cellars, the dark space under the stairs. And at night, he will come out. He will make terrifying, disembodied sounds: a baby screaming, a woman weeping, the sound of chains being dragged across the floor. He will pull the blankets off of sleeping people. He will touch them with a cold, clammy, and deeply unpleasant hand. He will turn the milk sour. He will make the dogs lame. He will cause the crops in the field to fail. His goal is not to kill the family. His goal is to drive them away, to break their spirits, to fill their home with such a profound and unrelenting sense of misery and fear that they have no choice but to pack up their belongings and to leave. But the boggart is a creature of a terrible and deeply personal attachment. He does not just haunt a house, he haunts a family. And the old stories tell of families who, driven to the brink of madness by the boggart's torments, will finally decide to move. And as they are driving their cart, filled with all their worldly possessions, down the road to their new home, they will hear a familiar and deeply unwelcome voice from inside one of the barrels on the back of the cart, and the voice will say, "Aye, we're moving, are we?" The boggart has come with them. You cannot escape a boggart. It is a supernatural curse, a shadow that once it has attached itself to you will follow you and torment you for the rest of your days. We travel now to the mines, the ships, and the homes of Germany, and here we meet a race of spirits who are perhaps the most complex, the most varied, and the most deeply and unapologetically transactional of all the European house goblins. These are the kobolds. The kobolds are a species of sprite, and they come in three very distinct varieties. The first and most common is the household kobold. Like the brownie and the domovoy, this kobold is a domestic spirit. He is often depicted as a small, child-sized figure dressed in the clothes of a peasant. And he will, if he is treated with respect, help the family with their chores. But the relationship with a kobold is a strict and deeply binding contract. The kobold expects and demands to be fed. A small portion of every meal must be left for him. If this payment is ever forgotten, the kobold will turn from a helpful spirit into a vicious and destructive poltergeist. The second type of kobold is a creature of the earth. These are the mine kobolds. They are small, gnarled, and often deeply malicious, gnome-like creatures who haunt the underground tunnels of the German mines. They are the guardians of the precious metals of the earth. And they are deeply hostile to the human miners who come to steal their treasure. They will cause cave-ins, They will extinguish the miners' lamps, and they will lead them astray into the dark, labyrinthine tunnels of the mine. The very name of the metal, cobalt, comes from these creatures. The medieval German miners, finding a strange, useless, and often poisonous ore that looked like silver, believed it to be a trick of the kobolds, a fake silver that the malicious spirits had placed there to fool them. The third and final type of kobold is a creature of the sea. These are the klabautermann. This is a ship-dwelling spirit, a small, cheerful, and often pipe-smoking sailor who is believed to be the living embodiment of the ship's own soul. The klabautermann is a benevolent and deeply helpful spirit. He will help the sailors by warning them of coming storms, by helping to plug small leaks in the hull, and by ensuring that the ship's cargo is always secure. To see the klabautermann is, for the most part, a sign of good luck. But there is one terrible exception. If you see the klabautermann standing on the deck of the ship, looking out towards the shore, it is a sign that the ship and everyone on it is doomed. We journey now to the cold, dark, and snow-covered farms of rural Scandinavia, and in particular to Sweden. And here, in the dead of the long, dark winter night, a small, ancient, and deeply respected figure is said to be at work. This is the Tomt, or the Nisse in Norway. The Tomt is the original and deeply pagan ancestor of the modern Christmas garden gnome. But he is not a cute or a comical figure. He is a small but very powerful and deeply serious household and farmstead spirit. He is depicted as a very small, very old man with a long, white beard and a pointed red cap. He is the original soul of the farm, the spirit of the first man who cleared the land and built the house. And he is the farm's sworn and eternal protector. He is a creature of a deep and almost puritanical work ethic. He is nocturnal, and he will perform his duties while the human family sleeps. He will guard the livestock. He will ensure that the farm is prosperous, and he will protect the family from any form of misfortune, both natural and supernatural. And in return, he asks for only one thing: respect, and a single yearly payment. A bowl of porridge with a pat of butter on top, left out for him on Christmas Eve. To forget this payment, or to treat him or the farm with disrespect, is to invite a terrible and often disproportionate wrath. A tomter who has been scorned will not just play tricks. He will lame the cattle. He will burn the barns. He will bring a deep and often permanent curse of misfortune upon the entire family. And he is known to have a particularly short and very violent temper. The old stories tell of a farm girl who, as a joke, hid the butter for the tomte's porridge at the bottom of the bowl. The tomter, enraged by this perceived insult, went into the barn and killed the family's best milk cow. When he returned to his porridge and finally found the butter at the bottom, he was so overcome with guilt at his own violent overreaction that he brought the dead cow back to life and made it even more productive than it had been before. The Tomt is a powerful and deeply moral spirit. He is a reminder that the land itself has a soul, and that it demands our respect, our hard work, and a simple and very important bowl of porridge on a cold winter's night. We return to the green and often deeply drunken folklore of Ireland. And here, in the dark, damp, and well-stocked cellars of the great houses and the local pubs, we meet a creature that is, in many ways, the irresponsible, alcoholic, and deeply charming cousin of the more famous leprechaun. This is the cluricaun. The cluricaun is a small, solitary, and almost always male fairy. He is often depicted as a tiny old man with a wizened red face dressed in the fine, if slightly shabby, clothes of a bygone era, and he is almost always completely and utterly drunk. His entire existence revolves around one thing, and one thing only: the acquisition and the enthusiastic consumption of wine and spirits. A cluricaun will attach himself to a particularly well-stocked wine cellar, and he will become its self-appointed and deeply unreliable guardian. He is a nocturnal creature, and he spends his nights sampling the wares, drinking himself into a stupor. If he is treated with respect and is not disturbed in his nightly revels, he can be a benevolent, if somewhat useless presence. He will protect the wine cellar from thieves, and he will ensure that the wine itself does not spoil. But if he is angered, or if the family is stingy with their drink, he will become a pure and deeply destructive menace. He will spoil the entire stock of wine. He will break all the bottles. He will ride the family's sheep and goats on wild, drunken midnight gallops around the countryside. The Cluricaune is a deeply and unapologetically Irish figure. He is a creature of pure, chaotic, and often deeply charming mischief. He is a symbol of the love of a good drink, and of the often very messy and very destructive consequences of having one too many. He is the ghost in the wine cellar, the drunkest and perhaps the most entertaining of all the household spirits. Our journey through the haunted homes of Europe comes to a final and deeply ancient end. We travel back in time to the heart of the great and deeply religious Roman Empire. And here, in every single Roman home, from the grand villa of the senator to the humble one-room apartment of the plebeian, a set of powerful and deeply beloved household gods was said to reside. These were the Lares. The Lares were the ancient and deeply sacred ancestral spirits of a Roman family. They were the ghosts of the first, founding ancestors of the bloodline, and they were the divine guardians of the family and of the home itself. They were often depicted as two small, dancing, and joyful young men dressed in short, belted tunics. Every Roman home had a small, sacred shrine, the Lararium, which was dedicated to the Lares. It was often located in the atrium, the public heart of the home, and every single day the family would make small offerings to these spirits. A portion of every meal, a small cake, a libation of wine, a garland of flowers. These were not acts of fear. They were acts of love, of respect, of a deep and abiding connection to the family's own personal history. The Lares were benevolent, protective spirits. They would watch over the family. They would ensure the prosperity of the household. They would protect the home from any form of external, malevolent influence. They were a constant and deeply comforting presence. They were a reminder that a Roman family was not just a collection of living individuals. It was a great and unbroken chain, stretching back into the mists of the past and forward into the hopes of the future. And the Lares were the living, spiritual embodiment of that chain. They were the ultimate and most beloved of all the household spirits, a final and deeply beautiful reminder that a home is not just a place where you live. It is a place that lives and breathes with the spirits of all those who have come before you. We journey now to the edge of the water, to the quiet, slow-moving rivers, the still, reflective lakes, and the dark, marshy pools of the Slavic lands. And here, in the shimmering, moonlit space between the water and the land, a creature of a profound and deeply tragic beauty is said to live. She is the ghost of a drowned girl. She is the Rusalka. The Rusalka is the restless and often deeply malevolent spirit of a young woman who has died a tragic, watery death. She is the ghost of a girl who has drowned herself after being betrayed by a lover, or of an unmarried pregnant woman who has been cast out by her family. Her soul, denied a proper burial and trapped by the great unresolved sorrow of her own end, cannot find peace. And so, she haunts the body of water where her life was extinguished. She is a creature of a dangerous and deeply seductive beauty. She appears as a young, beautiful woman with long, flowing hair, either a pale, ghostly green or a shimmering golden blonde. She is often naked, her pale skin glowing with a strange, otherworldly light in the darkness. She is seen on the warm summer nights, sitting on the riverbank, combing her long hair or dancing in circles in the moonlight with her other ghostly sisters. But her beauty is a trap. It is a lure. She is a creature of a deep and deeply vengeful sorrow. She hates the world of the living, and in particular, she hates men. She will use her beauty and her enchanting, hypnotic voice to lure a young man closer to the water's edge, and when he is within her reach, she will reveal her true and deeply terrifying nature. Her beautiful face will contort into a mask of pure, sorrowful rage, and she will reach for him with her long, cold, and supernaturally strong arms. She will grab him, and she will pull him screaming under the water. And there, in the cold, dark, and silent depths, she will either tickle him to death, his lungs filling with water as he laughs in a final, agonizing, and deeply surreal spasm, or she will entangle him in her long, strong hair, holding him under until he is drowned. The Rusalka is a terrifying and deeply tragic figure. She is a monster that has been created by human cruelty. and she is a grim and eternal reminder that the dark, still waters of the old world are often filled with the beautiful and very deadly ghosts of our own forgotten victims. Our journey takes us now to the cold, grey and storm-tossed shores of northern Scotland, and in particular to the remote and deeply magical islands of Orkney and Shetland. This is a world that is more sea than land, a world that is ruled by the tides and the mists, and it is here, in the liminal space between the land and the ocean, that the folklore tells of a creature of a profound beauty, of a deep, tragic longing, and of a terrible, hidden danger. This is the Selkie. The Selkies, or the Seal folk, are a race of supernatural, shape-shifting beings. In the water they are seals, sleek, graceful, and perfectly at home in the cold, churning ocean. But they possess the magical ability to shed their seal skins and to walk on the land in the form of a human being. And in their human form, they are said to be impossibly, supernaturally beautiful, with dark, soulful, and deeply sorrowful eyes that seem to hold all the mystery and the melancholy of the sea itself. The stories of the Selkies are almost always tragedies. They are tales of the deep and often fatal attraction between the world of the human and the world of the magical. A human man, a lonely fisherman, will be walking on a desolate beach at night, and he will see a group of beautiful, naked women dancing in the moonlight by the shore. And nearby he will see a pile of their discarded seal skins. In a moment of desperate and deeply selfish love, he will steal one of the skins and he will hide it. When the other Selkies return to the sea, one is left behind, unable to transform back into her true seal form without her skin. She is trapped, and the man will then take her as his wife. She makes a good and gentle wife. She will bear him beautiful, strange children who are said to have webbing between their fingers and toes. But she is never truly happy. She is a creature of the sea, an exile on the dry, hard land. She will spend her days staring out at the ocean, a look of profound and inconsolable longing in her dark eyes. She is a prisoner, held captive by a love that is also a cage. But the sea always, eventually, calls its own back. One day, often many years later, one of her own children, in their innocence, will discover the old, hidden sealskin locked away in a sea chest or hidden under the floorboards. They will bring it to their mother, and in that moment, her loyalty to her human family is broken by the older, deeper, and far more powerful call of her own kind. She will take the skin, she will kiss her sleeping children a final, sorrowful goodbye, and she will return to the sea, leaving her human husband to a life of heartbreak and loneliness. The stories say that she can never truly return to the human world, but she will sometimes be seen swimming just offshore, a sleek, dark seal, her sad eyes watching the children she was forced to leave behind on the shore. It is a story of love, of loss, and of the deep and often cruel truth that some worlds and some hearts are never meant to be joined. We remain in the mists of Scotland, but we leave the salty, wind-swept shores of the sea and we travel inland to the dark, cold, and unnervingly still waters of the freshwater lochs. And here, in the deep, peat-stained blackness of these inland lakes, another, far more malevolent and deeply predatory shapeshifter is said to lurk. This is the Kelpie. The Kelpie is a supernatural water horse, a creature that most often takes the form of a beautiful and seemingly tame horse. It will appear on the banks of a loch, often near a well-traveled path. It will be a magnificent animal, either a sleek, powerful black stallion or a beautiful, pure white mare. Its coat will be dripping with water, its mane tangled with weeds. It is often saddled and bridled, as if it is a lost or stray horse, just waiting for a weary traveler to find it. This is the trap. A tired traveler or a group of playful children seeing this beautiful, tame horse will think their luck has changed. They will approach it, they will speak to it, and they will try to mount it. And the moment their skin touches the creature's hide, their hand will become stuck fast. The Kelpie's skin is said to be magical and powerfully adhesive like flypaper. Once you touch it, you can never, ever let go. And then, the true and deeply horrifying nature of the beast is revealed. The beautiful, tame horse transforms. Its eyes will begin to glow with a demonic, hateful light. Its teeth will sharpen into long, needle-like fangs. and with its helpless, screaming victim or victims now permanently attached to its back, the Kelpie will turn and it will plunge at a terrifying, unstoppable gallop back into the deep, cold and silent waters of the loch. The victim is dragged under into the crushing, black and icy depths. They will be drowned, their lungs filling with the cold, dark water, and then the Kelpie will devour their body, all but their heart or their liver, which will later wash up on the shore, the only gruesome and often unrecognizable evidence of their passing. The Kelpie is a pure, unadulterated predator, a creature of a deep and deeply deceptive evil. But it is also a powerful and deeply practical piece of folklore. It is a cautionary tale, a ghost story that parents have told their children for centuries for one simple and very important reason: to keep them away from the dangerous and often treacherous waters of the loch. The monster may not be real, but the danger of drowning most certainly is. We journey now to the wild, green and deeply magical coastline of Ireland, and here, living in the cold, green and often stormy depths of the sea, we find the Irish equivalent of the mermaid and the merman. These are the Merrows. The Merrow, or the Moruad in the Old Gaelic, were a race of supernatural sea people, and like the fairies of the land, they were creatures of a deep and often dangerous duality. The female Merrow, the mermaid, was a creature of a profound and often fatal beauty. She was described as having the lower body of a fish and the upper body of a beautiful human woman, but she had small, almost invisible scales on her skin and a thin, web-like membrane between her fingers. And she possessed a special, magical object, a small, red cap, often made of feathers, called a Cohuilín druith. It was this cap that allowed her to live and to breathe beneath the waves. And like the Selkies of Scotland, the Merrow was often the subject of a tragic and deeply unequal romance. A human fisherman would see her, he would fall in love, and he would steal her magical red cap. Without it, she could not return to the sea. She was trapped, and he would take her as his wife. But the male Merrow, the merman, was a different story entirely. He was not a figure of beauty. He was a creature of pure, grotesque, and often comical ugliness. He was described as having green skin, a red, pig-like nose, small, pig-like eyes, and a mouth full of sharp, green teeth. And he was, for the most part, a benevolent, if deeply unattractive and often very drunk creature. The stories tell of them having a great love for human brandy and spirits, and of them forming strange and often deeply confusing friendships with the local fishermen, sometimes warning them of coming storms. The Merrows, in all their strange and contradictory beauty and ugliness, are a perfect symbol of the sea itself. A thing that is both beautiful and nurturing and a source of great bounty, but that is also wild, ugly, and deeply, profoundly dangerous. To love a Merrow was to love the sea, and it was a love that would almost always end in heartbreak and in the deep, cold, and silent embrace of the waves. We travel now to the cold, dark, and deeply melancholic waters of Scandinavia, to the dark, forest-shrouded lakes of Norway and the still, misty rivers of Sweden. And here, a creature of a deep and deeply seductive musical power is said to live. This is the Nuke, or the Naken. The Nuke is a male water spirit, a creature of a dangerous and often fatal allure. He is a shapeshifter, and he can appear in many forms. Sometimes he is a beautiful, young and naked man sitting on a rock by the water, playing a violin. Other times he is a strange brook horse, similar to the Kelpie, and sometimes he is just a dark, amorphous and deeply malevolent shape, with glowing yellow eyes that lives in the deepest, darkest parts of the river, under the bridges and near the watermills. But his true and most powerful form is his music. The Nuk is a master musician. His violin playing is supernaturally, impossibly beautiful. It is a sound that is so enchanting, so filled with a deep and deeply sorrowful longing that it is impossible to resist. He will play his music in the twilight hours, and the sound will drift over the water and through the forests and into the villages, and the women, the children, and sometimes even the men who hear it will be drawn to it, as if in a trance. They will follow the sound, deeper and deeper into the woods, until they come to the edge of the water where the Nuk sits, playing his beautiful, terrible song. And he will lure them, with his music, into the water, and they will drown. The Nuck is a collector of souls. The stories say that he must have a human sacrifice, at least one, every single year. But he is not purely evil. He is also a teacher. A human fiddle player who wishes to become a master can make a deal with the Nuck. If he brings the right offering, a black cat, a drop of his own blood, a bottle of brandy, and if he is brave enough to sit with the creature through the night, the Nuck will take his hand and he will guide it over the strings of the fiddle, and he will teach him to play with the same supernatural and deeply soul-stirring skill. But it is a dangerous bargain, for the man who learns to play the Nuck's music will often find that he can never stop, and that his own beautiful and deeply dangerous music will now lure others to their own watery graves. We return now to the windswept and deeply haunted Northern Isles of Orkney in Scotland, and here we meet a creature that is, without question, one of the most grotesque, most terrifying, and most deeply and unforgettably monstrous of all the water spirits in European folklore. This is not a creature of seductive beauty. This is a creature of pure, skinless, and biological horror. This is the Nuckelavee. The Nuckelavee is a demon of the sea. It is a creature that is so foul, so antithetical to life, that its very breath is a poison that can wilt the crops and bring a deadly plague, the mortasheen, to the livestock. It is a creature of a profound and deeply malevolent rage against all living things. And its appearance is a nightmare. It is a hideous and deeply unnatural fusion of a horse and a man. But it is not a centaur. The man's torso seems to grow parasitically from the back of the horse, as if he were a rider who has melted and fused with his own mount. And the entire creature has no skin. Its body is a raw and deeply detailed mass of exposed muscle, of pulsing yellow veins, and of thick, black, ropey sinews. It is a living, walking, and deeply gruesome anatomical diagram. The horse's head has a single, massive, and burning red eye. And the man's head, which lolls and rolls on a long, thin neck, is huge, with a gaping, pig-like mouth that breathes a foul, black, and venomous vapor. And his arms are so long that his clawed, skeletal fingers can drag along the ground as he moves. The Nuckelavee is a creature that lives in the sea, but it is a creature that hates the fresh running water of the rain and the rivers. And so it only comes ashore during the dry summer months to spread its plague and its terror across the islands. The only way to escape the Nuckelavee is to cross a running stream. The fresh water is anathema to it, a barrier that it cannot cross. The Nuckelavee is a creature of pure, unadulterated, and almost Lovecraftian body horror. It is a monster that seems to have been born not from a simple folkloric tradition, but from the deepest, most feverish, and most deeply disturbed pits of the human imagination. It is a walking, breathing, and skinless nightmare. We travel now to the Slavic lands, to the deep, dark, and often murky waters of the mill ponds, the rivers, and the swamps. And here, in the cold, muddy depths, a grumpy, old, and often deeply malevolent king is said to rule. This is the Vodyanoi. The Vodyanoi, the watery one, is the supreme master of all the freshwater bodies. He is a powerful and deeply territorial water demon, and he is a creature of a grotesque and deeply unpleasant appearance. He is often depicted as an old, naked man with a great, bloated, frog-like belly, a face that is green and covered in algae, and a long, tangled beard and hair that are the color of pondweed. His body is often covered in slime, in muck, in the dark, peaty soil of the riverbed. He is the spirit of the stagnant, the murky, and the drowned. He is a creature of a deeply foul temper, and he is a collector. He rules over a dark and deeply creepy underwater kingdom where he keeps the souls of the drowned as his eternal and unwilling servants. He is a creature of a deep and deeply predatory hunger. He will lie in wait in the deep pools under the watermills, a place that was considered to be particularly dangerous, and he will wait for a human or an animal to come too close, and he will reach up with his long, webbed and supernaturally strong hands, and he will pull them in. He will drag them, screaming and struggling, down into his dark, watery and mud-filled kingdom. The Vodyanoi is a deeply unpleasant and deeply feared figure. He is a warning. a warning that the quiet, peaceful-looking waters of the local pond are not as safe as they appear, and that in the deep, dark and murky depths, an old and very, very grumpy king is always waiting for a new and unwilling subject. We travel now to the quiet, slow-moving and deceptively peaceful-looking rivers and ponds of Lancashire in the north of England, and it is here, lurking just beneath the surface of the green, scummy, algae-covered water, that a particularly unpleasant and predatory creature is said to make her home. Her name is Jenny Greenteeth. Jenny Greenteeth is a river hag, a freshwater monster. She is described as having a green, mottled skin, long, stringy, pondweed-like hair, and a mouth full of long, sharp, and of course, green-stained teeth. She is a creature of pure, simple, and direct malice. She hides just beneath the surface of the water, near the riverbank, and she waits. And her prey is always the same. She is a specialist. She hunts children, and the old and the unwary. Any child who is foolish enough to play too close to the water's edge, any old person who stoops to gather water is at risk. She will reach up with her long, bony and supernaturally strong arms, and she will grab them by the ankles. And she will pull them in. She will pull them under the green, scummy surface of the water, down into the cold, dark and silent world of the riverbed. And she will drown them. And then she will devour them, her sharp green teeth tearing at their soft flesh. Jenny Greenteeth, like the Kelpie of Scotland, is a classic example of a nursery bogeyman. She is a monster that has been created for a very specific and very practical purpose, to frighten children into behaving in a safe and responsible way. She is a story that parents have told their children for centuries for one simple and life-saving reason: to keep them away from the very real and very mundane danger of drowning in the local river. She is the spirit of the swamp, the ghost of a disease, the green and very hungry face of a very real and very present danger. We return now to the Highlands of Scotland to meet a creature that is, in many ways, the saltwater and far more terrifyingly evil cousin of the Kelpie. This is the Each-whisker. The name, in Scottish Gaelic, means simply waterhorse. And like the Kelpie, the Each-whisker is a supernatural and deeply malevolent, shape-shifting waterhorse. But while the Kelpie haunts the freshwater lochs, the Each-whisker is a creature of the sea and of the sea lochs that are connected to it. And it is, by all accounts, the single most dangerous and most feared of all the water spirits in Scottish folklore. It appears, like the Kelpie, as a beautiful and seemingly tame horse. It will stand on the shore of a sea loch, a magnificent and tempting sight for a weary traveller, and like the Kelpie, its skin is adhesive. The moment a person touches it, they are trapped, but the fate of the Each-whisker's victim is far more gruesome than that of the Kelpie's. The Kelpie will simply drown and eat its prey. The Each-whisker is a creature of a far more refined and far more terrifying cruelty. It will carry its victim not into the water, but on a wild, terrifying ride, and then it will tear its victim to pieces, devouring the entire body, all except for the liver. And the liver of the victim will then, the next day, float to the surface of the water, the only gruesome and deeply unsettling sign of the previous night's slaughter. The Each-whisker can also take the form of a handsome man, and in this form, he will try to seduce a young human woman. But she can always recognize him by the sand and the seaweed that are tangled in his hair. If a woman is foolish enough to fall for his charms, she is doomed. He is a creature of a pure and deeply sadistic evil. He is the reason that the Highlanders of old were more afraid of the beautiful, dark and silent sea lochs than they were of the freshwater lochs of the interior, because they knew that in these dark, salty waters, a far more ancient and far more hungry kind of horse was waiting. We journey now to the folklore of Yorkshire and Lancashire in the north of England, to the stagnant, weed-choked ponds and the dark, murky marshes of the region. And here, in the cold, dark water, another and deeply unpleasant, child-snatching monster is said to live. This is the Grindylow. The Grindylow is a creature of a strange and deeply unsettling appearance. It is described as a small humanoid creature with a mottled greenish-brown skin and long, thin and incredibly strong arms and fingers. It is a creature that is, in essence, all arms. It hides in the dark water, under the lily pads and the pondweed, its small dark eyes just breaking the surface. And it waits. And like its cousin, Jenny Greenteeth, its prey is children. Any child who comes too close to the edge of the pond, any child who reaches in to catch a frog or to pick a water lily, is at risk. The Grindylow will shoot its long, sinewy arms out of the water with the speed of a striking snake. It will wrap its long, strong fingers around the child's wrist or ankle, and it will pull them in. It will drag them, screaming and struggling, down into the cold, dark, and muddy depths of the pond, down into its watery lair. And the child will never be seen again. The Grindylow is another and deeply effective nursery bogeyman, a creature designed to keep children away from the very real danger of the local pond. But its name and its story has had a long and deeply strange afterlife. In the popular Harry Potter series of books, the Grindylow makes an appearance as a small, green, and deeply aggressive water demon, a testament to the enduring and often deeply strange power of these old and very local English folktales. We step now from the world of the monstrous and the predatory to the world of the high and deeply romantic mythology of Arthurian legend. And here, in a misty, magical, and often mysterious lake, a very different and far more powerful kind of female water spirit is said to reside. She is not a hag, she is not a demon, she is a queen. She is the Lady of the Lake. The Lady of the Lake is one of the most important and most enigmatic figures in the entire Arthurian cycle. She is a powerful and deeply ancient enchantress, a creature that seems to be a remnant of a much older pre-Christian Celtic goddess of the water. Her name changes from story to story. Sometimes she is Nimue, sometimes she is Viviane, but her role is always the same. She is the guardian of some of the most powerful and most sacred magical objects in the world. It is she who gives the young King Arthur his most famous and most powerful weapon, the magical sword, Excalibur. She raises the sword, held in a beautiful, ethereal, white-sleeved arm from the surface of the lake, a gift from the otherworld to the new and chosen king of the human world. And she is also the foster mother and the magical teacher of the greatest of all of Arthur's knights, Sir Lancelot. She steals him as a baby, and she raises him in her magical underwater kingdom, teaching him the arts of war and of chivalry, before sending him back into the human world to become a champion. The Lady of the Lake is a complex and deeply powerful figure. She is a benefactor, a protector, a kingmaker. But she is also a creature of the otherworld, a fairy, and her motivations are not always clear. Her loyalties not always human. She is the ultimate and most powerful symbol of the deep and often very dangerous magic that resides just beneath the surface of the world. She is the queen of the deep, and it is from her and her watery kingdom that the true and often very tragic magic of the Arthurian world flows. Our journey through the haunted waters of Europe comes to a final and deeply iconic end. We return to the deep, dark, and mysterious waters of Scotland, and to its most famous and most enigmatic body of water, Loch Ness. This is a place of immense scale and profound, unknowable depth, and it is in these dark and largely unexplored depths that the world's most famous and most beloved monster is said to live, Nessie. The story of a strange beast in the loch is an old one, dating back to a 7th century biography of the Irish saint, Saint Columba, who is said to have repelled a water beast in the River Ness. But it was in the 20th century that the modern legend was truly born. In 1933, a new road along the loch's shore opened up the view and the sightings began to explode. People began to see a long, dark shape, a series of humps, a long serpentine neck rising from the depths. And in 1934, the famous surgeon's photograph gave the creature a face, a distinct, prehistoric, and deeply compelling form. That photograph was later revealed to be a hoax, a clever and brilliantly executed lie. But the hoax, when it was finally revealed, did not kill the legend. It barely even dented it. Because the Loch Ness monster had, by then, become something more than just a cryptid. It had become a story, a mystery, a symbol of the idea that even in our modern, well-mapped and supposedly all-knowing world, there are still some secrets that the old, dark and deep places are not yet ready to give up. Nessie is not a monster to be feared. She is a monster to be loved. She is a shy, elusive and deeply gentle giant, a living fossil, a survivor from a bygone age. To hunt for her is not to hunt for a killer. It is to hunt for a piece of lost time, for a living, breathing miracle. She is the ultimate and most beautiful of all the water spirits, a creature that is less a monster and more a deep and deeply cherished mystery, a final and very large question mark hiding in the cold, dark and peaty waters of a lonely Scottish loch. Our journey now takes us from the dark, earthy depths to the high, windswept skies of the ancient world. And here, in the mythology of classical Greece, we meet a creature that is the very embodiment of a divine curse, a living, breathing, and deeply foul storm of supernatural punishment. These are the Harpies. The Harpies were not born as monsters. In the earliest myths, they were beautiful, winged maidens, the personification of the storm winds, the swift and powerful messengers of the gods. But as the stories grew darker, so too did the Harpies. They were transformed, in the later legends, into hideous and deeply repulsive creatures. They were given the body of a great predatory bird, but the head and the torso of a withered and eternally starving old woman. Their name, in the Greek, means the Snatchers. And that is exactly what they were. They were the agents of a divine, and often deeply cruel, form of justice. They were the creatures who were sent to punish the wicked, to torment the damned. Their most famous story is that of King Phineas. The king had been granted the gift of prophecy by the gods, but he had abused it, revealing too many of their secrets to mankind, and for this, he was punished. He was blinded, and he was left on an island with a great feast laid before him every single day. But the moment he would try to eat, the Harpies would descend. They would come screaming from the sky, a whirlwind of foul feathers and sharp talons, and they would snatch the food from his very hands, from his very mouth, and what they did not steal, they would defile, leaving behind a stench so vile, so overpowering, that no mortal could bear to be near it. The Harpies were not just thieves, they were a living plague, a force of pure, divine, and deeply disgusting contamination. They were a reminder that the punishment of the gods was not always a swift and clean death. Sometimes it was an eternity of slow, grinding, and deeply, personally foul torment. We travel now to the dark and deeply superstitious world of the Roman Empire, and here, in the fearful whispers of the common folk, we meet a creature that is, in many ways, the direct and far more bloodthirsty ancestor of the Eastern European Strigoi. This was not just a creature of ill omen, it was a nocturnal, vampiric predator. This was the Strix. The Striges, in the plural, were a species of monstrous and deeply unnatural bird. They were often described as being a type of owl, but with the great, powerful wings of a bat, a beak that was sharp and hard as iron, and long, hooked talons. And they were creatures of a very specific and very terrible hunger. They were a predator that fed exclusively on the blood and the internal organs of human infants. The Roman mothers lived in a state of profound and constant terror of the Strix. It was believed that these creatures could flatten themselves, becoming as thin as a piece of paper, and that they could slip, silently and unseen, through the smallest crack in a window or a door. They would fly into the nursery in the dead of night, and they would descend upon the cradle of a sleeping baby, and they would attack. They would use their sharp, iron beaks to tear open the child's soft flesh, and they would drink its blood. And then they would reach into the wound with their long, sharp talons, and they would pull out the child's entrails, its liver, its heart, and they would devour them, raw. The Strix was not just a monster from a story. It was a supernatural explanation for a very real and very tragic and all too common event in the ancient world: sudden infant death syndrome. The fear of this creature was so real, so deeply ingrained, that a complex system of magical and often deeply desperate folk remedies was developed to protect a child from them. Wreaths of hawthorn, a plant that was believed to have powerful evil-warding properties, would be hung over the cradle. A ritual was performed where a priestess would touch the doorway of the child's room with a branch of the arbutus tree, and she would use a magical incantation to purify the space, to create a spiritual barrier that the Strix could not cross. The Strix is a terrifying and deeply gruesome glimpse into the dark and often deeply paranoid world of Roman folk belief, a world where the cry of an owl in the night was not just the sound of a bird, it was the sound of a monster coming for your children. We leave the grim, blood-drinking horrors of the classical world, and we journey now to the deeply mystical and often strangely beautiful folklore of medieval Russia. And here, in the branches of the great mythical world tree that was said to grow in the heart of the Slavic paradise, a very different and far more enchanting kind of winged creature was said to live. This was the alkonost. The alkonost is a creature of a profound and deeply sorrowful beauty. She is a large mythical bird with the body and the wings of a river kingfisher, but the head and the torso of a stunningly beautiful human woman. She is one of the great prophetic birds of paradise in Slavic mythology, and her power is her voice. The alkonost is a singer of a supernatural and almost unbearably beautiful song. Her voice is so sweet, so enchanting, so filled with a deep and deeply spiritual harmony, that anyone who hears it will forget everything else in the world. They will forget their own name, their own family, their own life. They will stand, as if in a trance, listening for days, for weeks, until they eventually die of starvation, a look of pure, ecstatic bliss on their face. But the alkonost is not a malevolent creature. Her song is not a trap. It is a gift, a beautiful and deeply dangerous gift. She is a divine messenger, a creature that lives in the world of the gods, and her song is a fleeting and often fatal glimpse into the beauty of the divine. She is also a creature that is deeply connected to the natural cycles of the world. The old legends say that the alkonost lays her eggs on the shore of the sea, and for the 7 days that she is incubating them, she will calm the winds and the waves, creating a period of perfect, serene, and deeply magical calm. She is a bringer of both a deadly ecstasy and of a deep and profoundly peaceful tranquility. The alkonost is a beautiful and deeply paradoxical creature, a symbol of the idea that the most beautiful things in the world are often also the most dangerous. In the branches of the same mythical Slavic world tree, the alkonost was not alone. She had a sister, a twin, a dark and deeply treacherous mirror image of her own sorrowful beauty. This was the siren. The siren, like her sister, is a large mythical bird with the head and the torso of a beautiful human woman, and she too is a singer of a supernaturally enchanting song. But where the song of the alkonost was a song of a holy spiritual ecstasy, the song of the siren is a song of a pure and deeply deceptive earthly pleasure. Her voice is a promise of a forgotten joy, of a happiness that you have lost, of a future that will be free of all pain and sorrow. And the man who hears her song will be overcome with a mad and deeply self-destructive desire. He will forget his family, he will forget his duties, he will forget everything but the need to find the source of that beautiful, lying voice. He will run, he will sail, he will follow her song over mountains and across seas, until he finally dies of exhaustion, his mind and his body broken by her beautiful and deeply empty promise. The siren is a creature of the pagan world, a direct descendant of the ancient Greek sirens. And in the later, Christianized folklore of Russia, she became a symbol of a deep and deeply dangerous temptation. She was the embodiment of the worldly, sinful pleasures that would tempt a man's soul away from the path of God. Her song was the sound of heresy, the sound of a false promise of a paradise on earth. But like her sister, the alkonost, the siren is not a creature of a simple, one-dimensional evil. She too is a creature of a deep and almost tragic sorrow. And it was said that in the late afternoon, the alkonost would fly to the orchard of paradise to sing a song of joy and of hope for the coming evening. And in the morning the siren would arrive, and she would weep, and she would sing a song of a deep and deeply sorrowful farewell to the joys that had just passed. They were the two beautiful and deeply necessary faces of the human experience itself, the joy of the present and the sorrow of the past. In the rich and deeply magical pantheon of Slavic folklore, there is one final and truly magnificent winged creature. This is not a creature of sorrow or of a dangerous temptation. This is a creature of pure and deeply coveted magic. This is the firebird. The firebird, or the żar-ptytsa in Russian, is a large, magical and glowing bird, a creature that is, in many ways, the Slavic equivalent of the Western phoenix. It is often depicted as a magnificent falcon or a peacock with a crest of feathers on its head and with plumage that glows with a soft and deeply magical red, orange and yellow light, the light of a distant and very beautiful fire. The firebird is not a creature to be feared, it is a creature to be sought. It is the ultimate and most difficult of all the fairy tale quests. The hero of the story, often the youngest and most foolish of three brothers, will be sent on an impossible journey to find and to capture the magnificent glowing bird. A single feather from the firebird's tail can illuminate an entire room with its magical light. The bird itself is a symbol of great power, of great wealth, of a rare and almost unattainable beauty, but it is a creature that is incredibly difficult to catch. It is a shy and deeply secretive bird, and its magical light can blind the eyes of any who look directly at it. The firebird is a symbol of a difficult and often dangerous quest. The journey to find it is always a long and arduous one, a journey that is filled with great challenges and terrible dangers. The hero must often enlist the help of other magical creatures, most famously the wise and powerful grey wolf, in order to succeed. The story of the firebird is not a story of a monster. It is a story of a journey into the deep and often very dangerous world of the magical, a journey that will test the hero's courage, his wisdom, and the purity of his heart. And the firebird itself, this beautiful, glowing, and deeply elusive creature, is the ultimate prize. It is a symbol of a magic that is not dark, not malevolent, but that is a thing of pure and deeply beautiful light. It is the flicker of a divine and magical hope, a single glowing feather in the deep and often very dark and very cold forest of the Slavic fairy tale. We begin our journey into the world of the great reptiles with a creature that is not a giant, but whose power is so absolute, so concentrated, so utterly and completely lethal, that it is often called the king of the serpents. This is the basilisk. The basilisk of the ancient and medieval world was a creature born of a deep and deeply paranoid fear of the unseen, the untouchable, and the instantly fatal. It was not a monster that you could fight with a sword. It was a monster that could kill you with a single, simple, and inescapable weapon: its gaze. Its birth was said to be a deeply unnatural and alchemically perverse event. It was hatched by a toad from the perfectly spherical, yolkless egg of a 7-year-old cock laid during the days of the dog star, Sirius. And the creature that emerged from this unholy union was a small but deeply potent monster. It was often described as a small serpent-like creature, but with a crown-like crest on its head, which marked it as royalty. But it was its powers that made it a true and almost unbeatable king of terror. The basilisk was a living vessel of pure, concentrated poison. Its breath was so toxic that it could wither plants and crack stones. Its touch was so venomous that a man who speared it from horseback would die, along with his horse, as the poison traveled, impossibly, up the length of the wooden spear. And then there was its gaze. To look directly into the eyes of the basilisk was to die, instantly. There was no defense. No saving throw. It was an absolute and deeply terrifying power. The only creature that was immune to the basilisk's power was the weasel, whose scent was said to be fatal to the Serpent King. And the only way for a human to kill a basilisk was to use its own deadly power against it. You had to approach it with a mirror, and when the creature saw its own deadly reflection, it would be instantly killed by the power of its own venomous gaze. The basilisk is a perfect and deeply chilling symbol of the kind of evil that does not need to be large to be powerful. It is a reminder that the most deadly poisons and the most absolute forms of power often come in the very smallest of packages. We travel now to the warm, sun-drenched and deeply Catholic lands of Provence in southern France. And here, in the deep, dark waters of the Rhone River, a very different and far more brutish kind of dragon was said to make its home. This was not a creature of subtle, venomous power. This was a monster of pure, destructive and almost unstoppable physical force. This was the Tarasque. The Tarasque, as it was described in the medieval legend of St. Martha, was a monstrous and deeply bizarre hybrid. It had the head of a great roaring lion, the body of an ox, 6 short, bear-like legs, and a long serpentine tail that ended in a scorpion's sting. And its back was protected by a thick, impenetrable, turtle-like carapace. It was a walking, breathing, and deeply ugly medieval battle tank. The Tarasque was a creature of a pure and deeply indiscriminate rage. It would emerge from its lair in the river and it would go on a rampage, destroying everything in its path. It would sink the boats on the river. It would burn the crops in the fields with its fiery, pestilential breath, and it would devour the livestock and the people of the local town of Nerluc. The creature was so powerful, so invulnerable to any form of physical attack, that the local knights and soldiers were completely powerless against it. And then the saint arrived. Saint Martha, a follower of Christ, came to the town, and she did not come armed with a sword or a spear. She came armed with her faith. She found the great roaring beast in the forest, in the middle of devouring a man, and she did not attack it. She held up her crucifix and she sprinkled the beast with holy water, and the great, savage, and unstoppable monster was instantly tamed. It became as gentle and as docile as a lamb. She tied her own delicate silken girdle around its neck, and she led the now tame monster back into the town. But the townspeople, in their fear and their ignorance, did not see a miracle. They saw only a monster, and they fell upon the poor, tame beast, and they killed it. And in their shame and their repentance, they renamed their town in honor of the saint who had shown them the true power of faith over brute force. The town of Nerluc became, and is still known today as, Tarascon. The story of the Tarasque is a classic Christian parable, a story of a great, savage, pagan beast that is not defeated by the sword, but is tamed by the gentle, and ultimately far more powerful force of the Christian faith. We return now to the dark, magical, and deeply forested lands of Romania, and here, in the world of the classic Romanian fairy tale, we meet a creature that is the great and deeply archetypal antagonist of the story. He is the Romanian equivalent of the classic European dragon, but he is a creature that is far more human and in many ways far more devious than his Western cousins. This is the Zemu. The Zemu is not just a simple, monstrous beast. He is an intelligent and often deeply magical being. He is, in essence, a kind of dragon ogre. He is a shapeshifter, but his true form is that of a giant, man-like creature who has the ability to breathe fire and who can sometimes take the form of a great, flying, dragon-like serpent. He lives in a castle, in the other world, a magical realm that is separate from our own, and he is a creature of a very specific and deeply traditional form of evil. He is a kidnapper. The plot of almost every Zemu story is the same. The great, evil Zemu will fly from his otherworld kingdom into our own, and he will steal something of great value. Most often, he will steal the sun and the moon from the sky, plunging the world into an eternal and deeply terrifying darkness. And almost always, he will also steal a beautiful young princess, and he will take her back to his castle to be his unwilling bride. And the hero of the story, the young, brave, and often magically gifted prince, Fat Frumos, must then embark on a great and deeply perilous quest. He must journey to the other world, he must find the Zemu's castle, and he must defeat the monster in a great, epic, and often magical battle. He will then rescue the princess, he will restore the sun and the moon to the sky, and he will return in triumph to the human world. The Zemu is a classic and deeply powerful fairy tale villain. He is a symbol of the great cosmic forces of darkness, of chaos, and of a deeply possessive and ultimately destructive form of masculine desire. And he is a monster that exists for one simple and very satisfying purpose: to be defeated by the young, brave, and deeply virtuous hero. We journey back to the ancient and deeply mythological world of classical Greece, to a sacred and deeply magical garden that was said to lie at the far western edge of the world. And here, guarding a single and very special tree, we meet one of the most ancient, most powerful, and most tragically underappreciated of all the great serpentine monsters. This is Ladon, the dragon of the Hesperides. Ladon was the guardian of the golden apples. These were not ordinary apples. They were a wedding gift from the earth goddess, Gaia, to the queen of the gods, Hera, and they possessed the power to grant immortality. They were, in essence, the Greek equivalent of the fountain of youth. And to protect this priceless and deeply dangerous treasure, Hera had placed her most powerful and most loyal guardian to watch over the tree on which they grew. Ladon was a dragon of immense size and power. He was a great 100-headed serpent-like beast, and each of his 100 heads spoke with a different and deeply terrifying voice. He was the child of two of the most ancient and most monstrous of all the primordial gods, Phorcys and Ceto. He was a creature of a pure and deeply divine lineage of monstrosity. And he was a guardian who never, ever slept. All 100 of his heads were always awake, always watchful, their 100 pairs of eyes scanning the garden for any intruder. But for his final and most famous of all labors, the great hero Heracles was tasked with stealing the golden apples. And Heracles, for all his godlike strength, knew that he could not defeat the great 100-headed dragon in a direct physical confrontation. And so he used a trick. He enlisted the help of the great Titan, Atlas, the being who held the entire world on his shoulders. Heracles offered to take the weight of the world for a short time if Atlas would go into the garden and retrieve the apples for him. Atlas, who was the father of the Hesperides, the nymphs who tended the garden, was one of the only beings who could enter the garden safely. He went in, he killed the great and ever-watchful dragon, Ladon, and he brought the apples back to Heracles. And Hera, in her grief for her slain and most loyal of all servants, took the body of the great dragon and she placed it in the night sky. And it became the constellation, Draco, the dragon, a great, winding, and eternal testament to the greatest and most tragic of all the serpentine guardians. We travel now to the low-lying and often very wet county of Sussex in the south of England, and here, in the deep, dark, and often seemingly bottomless ponds that dot the landscape, a specific and very local kind of water dragon is said to live. This is the Nucker. The name, Nucker, comes from an old Anglo-Saxon word, nickor, which means simply water monster. And it is a name that is related to the Scandinavian Nuck and the German Nixie. The Nucker is, in essence, the last, surviving, and deeply English remnant of a much older and far more widespread Germanic belief in water spirits. The Nucker is a classic serpentine water dragon. It is described as being a long, slimy, and often very large serpent-like creature that lives at the bottom of a Nucker hole, a deep, spring-fed pond. These Nucker holes were believed to be bottomless, their depths a direct and deeply sinister gateway to the underworld. The Nucker was a creature of a classic dragon-like malevolence. It would terrorize the local countryside, it would devour the livestock, it would poison the local water supply with its venomous breath, and sometimes it would drag the local villagers down into its deep, dark, and watery lair. The stories of the Nucker are almost always the stories of its defeat. The local hero, sometimes a knight, sometimes a clever local farmer, must find a way to kill the beast and to free the land from its terror. The most famous of these legends is the story of the Nucker of Lyminster. The monster was slain, the story says, not by a great knight in shining armor, but by a clever local boy, a farmer's son named Jim Polk, who killed the great dragon by feeding it a massive and deeply poisoned Sussex pie. The story of the Nucker is a wonderful and deeply charming piece of local English folklore, a story that brings the grand, epic, and often very distant myth of the dragon-slaying hero down to a very small, very local, and very, very English scale. We journey now to the lush, green, and deeply mountainous region of Asturias in northern Spain, and here, in a land that is steeped in its own unique and deeply ancient Celtic traditions, a very specific and very powerful kind of dragon is said to live. This is the Quelebre. The Quelebre is a great, winged and immortal serpent dragon, and it is a creature that is, first and foremost, a guardian. But it is not the guardian of a golden apple. It is the guardian of a treasure, a vast and often deeply magical treasure that is hidden away in a remote cave deep in the mountains. And the Quelebre is also, almost always, the guardian of a beautiful and deeply enchanted fairy princess, an Anjana, who is being held captive alongside the treasure. The Quelebre is a creature of a deep and deeply ancient power. It does not need to eat. It is immortal. And its only weakness is a single and very specific point on its neck, a spot that is not covered by its thick and otherwise impenetrable scales. But the Quelebre is not a static guardian. It has a life cycle. On the night of St. John, the great midsummer festival that is a remnant of a much older pagan solstice celebration, the Quelebre is said to become restless. It will fly out of its cave, and it will fly far out over the sea to a mythical and deeply magical land that lies beyond the horizon. The story of the Quelebre is a classic fairy tale romance. The hero of the story must find the dragon's cave. He must find a way to slay the great immortal beast, and he must rescue the beautiful and deeply grateful enchanted princess. The Quelebre is a perfect and deeply powerful symbol of the great and often very dangerous obstacles that a hero must overcome in order to win both the treasure and the love of the magical and deeply mysterious other world. We step now from the world of the specific local dragon to a creature that is a part of a much broader and deeply pan-European mythological tradition. This is a creature that is often mistaken for a dragon, but that is, in the strict and often deeply pedantic world of heraldry and mythology, a very different and often far more vicious beast. This is the wyvern. The wyvern is, in essence, a two-legged dragon. A true classical four-legged dragon, like the one that is the symbol of Wales, is a creature of the earth. It is a symbol of a deep, ancient, and often royal power. But the wyvern, with its two legs and its two great bat-like wings, is a creature of the air. It is a faster, more agile, and often far more aggressive and less intelligent predator. In the old medieval bestiaries, the wyvern was often a symbol of a more pestilential and more demonic form of evil. It was often associated with plague, with envy, with war. It was a creature of a pure and often very direct form of a destructive power. It did not hoard treasure. It did not guard princesses. Its sole purpose was to destroy. And it was a very popular and very powerful symbol in the world of heraldry, the art of the coat of arms. To have a wyvern on your shield was to mark yourself as a great and deeply ferocious warrior. It was a symbol of a swift and deeply deadly form of a martial power. The wyvern is a perfect and deeply powerful example of the way that a mythological creature can be tamed, can be controlled, and can be transformed into a symbol of the very human and often very brutal and very political world of war and of power. Our journey through the world of the serpents and the dragons comes to a final and deeply ancient end. We travel to the cold, dark, and deeply forested lands of Scandinavia and Germany. And here, in the oldest, deepest layers of the Germanic and Norse mythology, we meet a creature that is, in many ways, the great and deeply primal ancestor of all the other European dragons. This is the lindworm. The lindworm, or the lindorm in the Old Norse, is a great and often monstrous serpent dragon. But it is a creature that is in a state of a profound and often very strange anatomical confusion. Sometimes it is just a giant, venomous snake. Other times it is a great serpent with the head of a horse. And most famously, it is a great serpentine dragon, but one that has only two, or sometimes even just one, foreleg. It is a creature that is still in the process of evolving. A creature that is caught in the strange, blurry space between the serpent and the dragon. The lindworm of the old heroic sagas is almost always a monster that must be slain. It is a Fafnir, a creature that jealously and greedily guards a great and often cursed hoard of treasure in its dark subterranean lair. The hero of the story, A Siegfried or a Sigurd must journey to the lair of the beast, and he must, through his courage and his strength, kill the great and often seemingly unbeatable serpent dragon. And when he kills the beast, and he bathes in its magical and often poisonous blood, he is transformed. He gains the ability to understand the language of the birds. He gains a skin that is impenetrable to any weapon. He gains a new and deeply supernatural kind of a wisdom. The Lindworm is the ultimate and most ancient of all the serpentine guardians. He is the great and deeply terrifying monster that a hero must defeat, not just to win the gold, but to win the wisdom, to be transformed, and to become, in the end, a hero himself. We begin in the dark and deeply haunted moonlit roads of rural Ireland to meet a creature that is, in many ways, the true, ancient, and far more terrifying ancestor of the familiar, modern image of the Headless Horseman. This is not a simple ghost. This is a powerful and deeply feared entity from the fairy world. This is the Dullahan. The Dullahan is a member of the Unseelie Court, the dark, malevolent, and deeply dangerous side of the fairy world, and he is the embodiment of a very specific and very final kind of death. He is the coachman of the dead, the summoner of souls. He is seen, always at night, riding a great, snorting, and demonic black horse, a creature with flaming eyes and nostrils that breathe smoke and sparks. And the Dullahan himself is a terrifying sight. He is a tall, dark figure, dressed in black, funereal robes, and he has no head. His head has been severed from his neck, and he carries it under his other arm like a gruesome and strangely sentient lantern. The head itself is said to be the color and texture of stale, moldy cheese, and it is alive. Its eyes are small, black, and constantly darting back and forth like those of a frightened insect, and its mouth is stretched into a wide, hideous, and unceasing grin. The Dullahan uses his own severed head to light his way through the dark Irish night, holding it up high, its decaying flesh casting a pale, phosphorescent, and deeply unholy glow. He carries a weapon, but it is not a sword. It is a human spine, the long, articulated vertebrae of a long-dead man, which he uses as a whip. He is a solitary and largely silent creature, but if he chooses to speak, he has only one thing to say. He will call out the name of a person, and the person whose name he calls is doomed. Their soul has just been summoned. Their death is now imminent and utterly, completely unavoidable. There is no defense against the Dullahan. Locks will spring open at his approach. Gates will fly open to let him pass. And you must never, ever watch him as he passes. If you are caught observing him on his grim business, he will either lash out your eyes with his human spine whip, or he will douse you in a basin of blood, a mark that signifies that you are the next person on his list. The only thing that the Dullahan is said to fear is pure, unworked gold. Even a single, small, gold pin dropped in his path will cause him and his great black horse to rear up in terror and to vanish back into the night. He is a terrifying and deeply surreal piece of Irish folklore, a reminder that in this ancient and magical land, death does not always come as a silent, skeletal reaper. Sometimes it comes as a headless, grinning, and deeply punctual coachman on his way to his next and final appointment. We travel now to the dark, misty, and deeply romantic forests of the 18th century Germany, and here, in the world of the great and deeply atmospheric poetry of Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, we meet a spirit that is not a brutal physical monster, but a subtle, seductive, and deeply psychological predator. This is the Erlking, the Elf King. Goethe's famous 1782 ballad, Erlkönig, tells the story of a father riding on horseback through a dark and stormy forest late at night. He is holding his young son in his arms, and the boy is sick in the grip of a raging fever. And as they ride, the child begins to see something that the father cannot. He sees the Erlking. The Erlking is a creature of a dangerous and deeply deceptive allure. He appears to the child as a king with a crown and a long, white, flowing robe, and he speaks to the child in a soft, sweet, and deeply seductive voice. He tries to lure the child away from his father, away from the world of the living. He promises the child beautiful games, golden garments, and that his own daughters will sing and dance for him. The father, a man of reason and of the daylight world, cannot see the spirit. He tries to rationalize his son's terror. The Earl King's crown, he says, is just a streak of mist. The Earl King's whispering voice is just the sound of the wind rustling in the dry leaves. But the child sees the truth, and as the father refuses to acknowledge the danger, the Earl King's seduction turns to a threat. His soft, sweet voice becomes a cold, hard command. "I love you," he says to the child. "Your beautiful form entrances me, and if you are not willing, then I will use force." The father, now terrified himself by the sheer animal terror in his son's voice, spurs his horse, riding for his life for the safety of their home. But he is too late. When he finally arrives and he looks down at the child in his arms, he finds that he is holding a corpse. The Earl King has claimed him. The Earl King is a terrifying and deeply powerful personification of a child's fever dream, of the moment when a sickness is not just a sickness, but becomes a living, breathing, and deeply malevolent entity, a seductive, whispering king who has come to lure the soul away from the body. He is the beautiful and deeply terrifying face of a child's final and fatal fever. We step now from the dark, natural world of the forest to the high, sacred, and man-made world of the great Gothic cathedrals of France. And here, perched on the rooftops, on the flying buttresses, staring down at the city below with their cold, stone eyes, we meet a race of monsters that are a profound and deeply strange paradox. They are both demons, and they are guardians. They are the gargoyles. The word gargoyle comes from the Old French gargouille, meaning throat, the same root as our word gargle, and their original practical purpose was just that. They were ornate and often deeply grotesque waterspouts designed to channel the rainwater away from the stone walls of the cathedral, protecting the sacred building from the slow, erosive, and deeply damaging power of the water. But they were, from the very beginning, something more. They were a form of a sermon written in stone. They were a grotesque and often deeply comical depiction of the demonic, the sinful, the monstrous. They were the faces of the devils and the damned souls of hell, their ugly, leering, and often tortured expressions, a constant and deeply public reminder to the people below of the very real and very terrible consequences of a life of sin. But there is a deeper and more magical level to their folklore. The gargoyles were not just a warning against the demonic, they were a protection from it. They were believed to be a kind of spiritual scarecrow, a form of apotropaic magic. Their hideous, monstrous forms were so terrifying that they would scare away any real and far more dangerous evil spirits that might try to approach the sacred space of the church. They were, in a sense, fighting fire with fire, using the image of the demonic to repel the demonic itself. And there is a final and most beautiful of all the legends. The story of the Gargoyle of Rouen. It tells of a great and terrible dragon that was terrorizing the city. The good Saint Romanus defeated the beast, and he brought its body back to the city to be burned. But the creature's head and its long serpentine neck, which had been tempered by its own fiery breath, would not burn. And so the head and the neck were mounted on the wall of the new cathedral, a trophy of the church's victory over the old, pagan, and draconic powers of the past. And this, the story says, was the very first gargoyle. The gargoyles are a profound and deeply beautiful symbol of the complex and often very strange relationship between the sacred and the profane. A reminder that sometimes the most holy of all places are guarded by the most monstrous of all faces. We journey now to the high, snow-covered and deeply pagan-haunted mountains of the Alps, in the regions of Austria and Bavaria. And here, in the darkest and most magical nights of the winter, a powerful and deeply ambivalent goddess is said to walk the earth. She is a creature of a profound and deeply terrifying duality. Her name is Perchta. Perchta is an ancient pre-Christian goddess, a figure who is believed to be a remnant of a much older Germanic or Alpine mother goddess, and she has two very distinct and very different faces. She is the goddess of the 12 nights of Christmas, the sacred and deeply magical period between Christmas and the Epiphany. And on these nights, she will lead a procession, a form of the wild hunt through the winter landscape. To the good, the pious, the hard-working people of the villages, she is a beautiful and deeply benevolent figure. She will appear as a beautiful young woman dressed all in white, her skin as pale and as pure as the new fallen snow. She is a goddess of light, of bounty, of reward. She will leave a small silver coin in the shoe of a good child or in the pail of a hard-working servant girl. She is the bright perchter, a figure of pure and almost angelic goodness. But she has another face, a darker face. To the lazy, the sinful, the disrespectful, she is a monster. She will appear as a hideous old hag with a long, hooked iron nose and a wild, tangled mass of hair. She is the butcher perchter, a figure of pure and deeply gruesome punishment. And her punishment is very specific and very, very terrible. She carries a long, sharp knife. And if she finds a woman who has not finished all of her spinning for the year, or a person who has eaten something other than the traditional ritual meal of fish and gruel on her feast day, she will use that knife to slice open their belly, and she will pull out their internal organs, and she will stuff the empty cavity with straw and pebbles. Perchter is the ultimate and most terrifying of all the seasonal enforcers. She is both the beautiful, gift-giving snow queen and the hideous, gut-slitting winter witch. She is a stark and deeply terrifying reminder that in the old, dark world of the winter folklore, a single and very fine line separates the reward from the retribution, the blessing from the blade. We step now from the world of the walking, talking monster to the world of the plant that screams. We delve into one of the most famous, most powerful, and most deeply and unnervingly human of all the magical plants in European folklore. This is the mandrake. The mandrake is a real plant, a member of the nightshade family, and its root is a strange and deeply unsettling thing. It is a thick, forked, and often vaguely humanoid-looking root that often resembles a small, malformed human body. And it is this resemblance that is the source of its immense and deeply dangerous magical power. The mandrake of the folklore was not a normal plant. It was believed to be a kind of magical and deeply sinister homunculus. The old legends said that the mandrake root would only grow at the foot of a gallows, where it was seeded and nourished by the bodily fluids that dripped from the corpse of a hanged and often innocent man. The root was a powerful and deeply coveted ingredient in medieval witchcraft and alchemy. It was believed to have the power to grant fertility, to bring great wealth, and to be a key ingredient in the creation of a love potion. But to harvest it was a task of an immense and often fatal danger. The danger was its scream. The legends said that when the mandrake root was pulled from the earth, it would let out a single, high-pitched and supernaturally powerful shriek. A scream so terrible, so soul-shattering that any human being who heard it would die instantly. And so, a complex and deeply specific ritual was devised to harvest it safely. The sorcerer would not pull the root himself. He would tie a strong cord around the top of the plant, and the other end of the cord he would tie around the neck of a dog, most often a black dog that had been starved for 3 days. The sorcerer would then stand at a safe distance, and he would plug his ears with wax, and he would hold out a piece of meat. The hungry dog, seeing the meat, would lunge for it, and in doing so, it would pull the mandrake root from the earth. The root would let out its fatal scream, and the poor, unfortunate dog would fall down, dead. But the sorcerer, his ears safely plugged, would survive, and he would now be the owner of the powerful and deeply blood-soaked magical root. The mandrake is a perfect and deeply chilling symbol of a magic that is not a thing of light and of wonder, but is a thing that is born of death, of suffering, and of a cold and deeply calculated form of a ritualistic and very necessary sacrifice. We travel now to the far western and deeply Celtic peninsula of Brittany in France. This is a land of ancient standing stones, of a wild and deeply dramatic coastline, and of a folklore that is steeped in a profound and deeply melancholic relationship with death. And here, death does not come as a skeleton. It comes as a man who is very much alive, but he is a man who is in the service of the dead. This is the Ankou. The Ankou is not death itself. He is his servant, the henchman of death. And his job is a grim and deeply personal one. He is the collector of the souls of the dead. He is often depicted as a tall, thin, and very old man with long white hair and a wide-brimmed black hat that shadows his face. Or sometimes he is shown as a skeleton, his head swiveling on his spine so that he can see everything in all directions at once. He travels the lonely country roads at night in a great, old, and deeply decrepit wooden cart. The cart is pulled by 2 horses, one old and emaciated, the other young and strong. And as the cart moves, its axle makes a single, continuous, and deeply terrifying creaking sound. A sound that is known in the Breton language as Carrig an Ancu, the wheelwrick of death. To hear that sound in the night is to know that the Ancu is on his rounds, and that someone in your village, or perhaps even in your own home, is about to die. The role of the Ancu is a strange and deeply tragic one. He is not a permanent, supernatural entity, he is a human being. The legend says that the Anco of any given parish is always the last person who died in that parish in the previous year, and they are doomed to serve for 1 full year as the collector of the dead until they are replaced by the next and final soul of the following year. The Ancu is a terrifying and deeply sorrowful figure. He is a man who is caught in a terrible and inescapable cycle of death and of duty. He is not a monster. He is a public servant performing a grim and deeply necessary job. He is a reminder that in the old, tight-knit, and deeply fatalistic world of rural Brittany, the dead were not distant, forgotten beings. They were still a part of the community, and one of them was always on duty. Our final journey in this chapter takes us to the old medieval duchy of Normandy in northern France. And here we meet a figure that is the direct and far more demonic ancestor of the great pan-European myth of the Wild Hunt. This is not just a ghostly procession of hunters. This is a vision of hell itself on the march. This is the Mesnir Hellequin, the household of Hellequin. The story, as it was recorded by the 12th century Norman chronicler Orderic Vitalis, is told as a true and deeply terrifying eyewitness account. A young priest on his way home on a cold January night hears the sound of a great approaching army. He hides by the side of the road and he witnesses the procession. It is a terrifying and deeply infernal cavalcade. First comes a giant carrying a huge uprooted tree as a club. Then comes a great crowd of the damned, men, women, and even priests, all being tormented by a host of small, black, and deeply hideous demons. They are being pricked with hot goads, their clothes are on fire, they are being ridden like horses. This is a vision of the suffering souls of purgatory, or of hell itself. And at the head of this terrible procession rides a single, dark, and deeply menacing figure, a man on a great black horse carrying a black banner. This is the leader of the hunt. This is Hellequin. The figure of Hellequin is an ancient one. He is believed to be a folk memory of the old pagan Germanic god, Wotan or Odin, in his role as the leader of the souls of the dead. But in the Christianized world of medieval Normandy, he has been transformed. He is no longer a god. He is a demon, a king of hell. The Mesnir Hellequin is a profound and deeply terrifying piece of medieval Christian propaganda. It is a vision of the very real and very terrible consequences of a life of sin, but it is also a story that would have a long and very strange afterlife. The figure of Hellequin, the dark, demonic, and often deeply comical leader of the damned, would, over the centuries, be transformed. He would be tamed, he would lose his demonic terror, and he would become the familiar, mischievous, and brightly costumed clown of the Italian commedia dell'arte, the character that we know today as the Harlequin. It is a strange and deeply ironic journey. A journey that takes a terrifying, demonic king of hell and transforms him into a children's entertainer. It is a perfect and deeply bizarre example of the way that even our most terrifying of monsters can, over time, be defanged, declawed, and ultimately turned into a joke. We begin in the snow-covered alpine villages of Austria and Bavaria in the heart of the Christmas season. This is a time of light, of warmth, of joy, of the celebration of the birth of the Christ child. But in these old and deeply pagan-haunted lands, the light of Christmas has always been accompanied by a very deep and very ancient shadow. For every gentle saint, there is a monstrous, terrifying counterpart. And the dark and deeply menacing shadow of Saint Nicholas is a creature known as Krampus. Krampus is not a simple villain. He is the other half of the Christmas story, the necessary, terrifying balance to the gentle benevolence of Saint Nicholas. While Saint Nick comes to reward the good children with gifts, Krampus comes for the wicked. He is a pre-Christian, pagan demon, a creature of the wild, untamed, and often very dangerous winter world, who has been absorbed and repurposed by the Christian tradition. His appearance is a terrifying and deeply effective collage of monstrous parts. He is a tall, hairy, and goat-like creature with the cloven hooves and the long, curving horns of a satyr or a demon. He has a long, pointed, and deeply unsettling serpentine tongue which lolls from his mouth, and he carries a bundle of birch branches, which he uses to swat and to punish the naughty children. But his most terrifying tool is the large wicker basket or the sack that he carries on his back. For the children who have been truly, unforgivably wicked, a simple swat with the birch branches is not enough. Krampus will stuff them into his sack, and he will carry them away, screaming, from the warmth and the safety of their homes. And he will take them back to his dark, fiery, and presumably very unpleasant lair to be dealt with later. On the night of December 5th, the Krampusnacht, or Krampus Night, this is not just a story, it is a living, breathing, and often very drunken reality. The young men of the villages will dress up in elaborate and often genuinely terrifying Krampus costumes, with carved wooden masks, shaggy fur suits, and a cacophony of loud clanging cowbells. And they will run in a great chaotic and often very intimidating horde through the streets of the town, a terrifying and deeply anarchic pagan army, playfully, and sometimes not so playfully, terrorizing the onlookers. Krampus is the wild, chaotic, and deeply necessary monster of Christmas, a horned and very hairy reminder that even in the most sacred and holy of all nights, the old, dark, and very wild pagan world is still there, just beneath the surface, waiting to be unleashed. We remain in the high, frozen, and deeply enchanted alpine regions of Austria, Germany, and Switzerland, and in the same dark and magical period of the 12 Nights of Christmas. And here, we meet a group of spirits who are, in many ways, the wild, chaotic, and far more numerous ancestors of the solitary Krampus. These are the Perchten. The Perchten are the attendants, the entourage, the ghostly army of the great and deeply ambivalent winter goddess Perchta. And like their mistress, they have a profound and deeply terrifying duality. There are two kinds of Perchten. There are the Schönperchten, the beautiful Perchten, who are the spirits of light, of goodness, of the coming new year. They will march in the processions, bringing good luck and prosperity to the villages they pass through. But then, there are the Schiakperchten, the ugly Perchten, and these are the true and deeply terrifying monsters of the winter. They are a horde of grotesque and often deeply hideous demonic spirits. They have the faces of devils, of monsters, of twisted, gnarled, and often deeply comical old men. They are covered in shaggy, animalistic fur, and they are armed with whips, with chains, and with loud, clanging bells. Their purpose is a sacred and deeply violent one. They are a spiritual fumigation squad. They will run in a great, chaotic, and terrifying horde through the villages, their bells clanging, their whips cracking, their voices a chorus of demonic growls and shrieks. And their purpose is to drive out the old, evil, and malevolent spirits of the dying year. They are fighting a war against the ghosts of the winter, and they are doing it with the weapons of pure, unadulterated noise and terror. Like the Krampusnacht, the Perchtenlauf, the Perchten Run is a living, breathing, and often deeply intimidating folk tradition. The men of the villages will don the same, terrifying, and often very ancient carved wooden masks, and they will become the ugly Perchten for a single, chaotic, and deeply cathartic night of ritualized terror. The Perchten are a profound and deeply powerful reminder that in the old pagan world, the coming of the new year was not a gentle or a quiet affair. It was a violent, chaotic, and very, very loud battle. A battle that had to be fought and won against the long, dark, and very real demons of the winter night. We journey now to the most remote, the most geologically volatile, and the most deeply and wonderfully strange of all the Nordic lands, Iceland. And here, in the deep, dark, and often blizzard-swept nights of the Christmas season, a very specific and very, very large feline predator is said to stalk the snowy landscape. This is not a creature that punishes you for being bad. This is a creature that punishes you for being poor. This is the Jólakötturinn, the Yule cat. The Yule cat is a monstrous and truly massive black cat. It is said to be the pet of the great and deeply terrifying mountain ogress, Grýla, and her 13 mischievous and often deeply unpleasant sons, the Yule lads. And the Yule cat is a creature of a very specific and very strange hunger. It is a creature that has a taste for human beings. But it does not hunt everyone. It only hunts for those who have not received a new piece of clothing to wear before Christmas Eve. This strange and deeply specific piece of folklore has its roots in the very practical and very harsh realities of old Icelandic farm life. The autumn wool work, the shearing, the spinning, the weaving had to be finished before the Christmas season began. And so the farm owners would reward their workers who had finished their tasks on time with a gift of new clothes. It was a simple and deeply effective form of a holiday bonus. And the story of the Yule cat was a terrifying and deeply effective form of a supernatural incentive. It was a story that was told to frighten the workers into finishing their work on time. The message was simple. If you are lazy, if you do not finish your work, you will not get your new clothes. And if you do not get your new clothes, the great black and very hungry Yule cat will see you, and he will eat you. The Yule cat is a wonderful and deeply bizarre example of a piece of folklore that has been created to enforce a specific social and economic norm. He is a monster that is, in essence, a tool of the ruling land-owning class, a supernatural enforcer of a capitalist work ethic. He is the most terrifying and most deeply effective of all the corporate mascots, a giant and very hungry cat who wants to make sure that you always meet your deadlines. We travel now from the frozen volcanic landscapes of the far north to the warm, sun-drenched and deeply ancient lands of Greece and the Balkans. But even here, in the heart of the Mediterranean, the 12 days of Christmas are a time of a deep and deeply strange form of a supernatural danger. For on Christmas Eve, a great and deeply malevolent army of goblins is said to rise from the depths of the earth. These are the Cailleach. The Cailleach are a race of small, black, and deeply hideous goblin-like creatures. They are hairy, they have the legs of a goat or a donkey, and they have long, sharp claws and red, burning eyes. And for most of the year, they live deep inside the earth. And they have only one job. They are trying to destroy the world. They spend their year gnawing and sawing at the roots of the great world tree, the tree that holds up the entire physical world. And by the time of the winter solstice, they have almost succeeded. The tree is held by a single, thin thread. And then, on Christmas Day, a day when the power of the light and of the Christ child is at its strongest, they are allowed to rise from the earth and to swarm into the world of men. And for the 12 days of Christmas, they are a plague of pure, chaotic, and deeply destructive mischief. They will pour into the homes of the villagers through the chimney. They will piss on the fire and extinguish it. They will sour the milk. They will tangle the yarn. They will break the furniture. They will eat all the Christmas food. They are not, as a rule, killers. They are vandals, a force of pure, anarchic, and deeply annoying chaos. But their time in our world is short. On the day of the Epiphany, on January 6th, the sun, now reborn and at its full strength, will drive them back, screaming into the depths of the earth. And when they return to their subterranean world, they find that in their absence, the great world tree has completely healed itself. And so they must begin their work of slowly and futilely trying to destroy the world all over again. The Cailleach are a wonderful and deeply strange mythological explanation for the chaos, the stress, and the often very messy and very destructive nature of a large family Christmas gathering. We journey now to the Highlands of Scotland to meet a figure who is not a simple seasonal boogeyman. She is a goddess, a powerful, ancient, and deeply terrifying divine being. She is the queen of the winter, the creator of the landscape, the mother of all the gods and the giants. She is the Cailleach. The Cailleach is one of the oldest and most powerful figures in all of Celtic mythology. Her name means the old woman, or the veiled one, and she is the personification of the winter itself. She is a divine hag, a giantess of immense age and power. She has a single and deeply malevolent eye in the center of her forehead. Her skin is a deathly bluish white, and her teeth are the color of red rust. She carries a magical staff, and with this staff she can freeze the very ground with a single touch. She is a creature of a pure and deeply creative form of a destructive power. The old legends say that the entire mountainous landscape of Scotland was created by her, either deliberately as she was building her great stone thrones, or accidentally as she was striding across the land, dropping great boulders from her apron. She is the ruler of the dark half of the year, from the festival of Samhain on Halloween to the festival of Beltane on May Day. And in this time, she is the absolute and often deeply cruel mistress of the winter. She is the one who brings the snow, the ice, the killing frosts. She is a hater of all life, and she will try, with all her might, to prevent the coming of the spring. But she is also, in a strange and deeply paradoxical way, a protector. She is a guardian of the animals of the wild, and in particular, of the deer. She is a complex, powerful, and deeply awe-inspiring figure. She is not a simple, evil monster. She is a force of nature. The raw, untamed, and often very brutal power of the winter, given the face of a great and very, very old and very, very dangerous goddess. Our journey through the world of the winter's children comes to a final and deeply bizarre end, back in the folklore of the Balkans, and in particular in the lands of Bulgaria, of Turkey, and of Greece. And here, we meet a creature that is, in many ways, the close and far more grotesque cousin of the Greek Kallikantzaroi. This is the Karakonkolos. The Karakonkolos are a species of malevolent and often deeply stupid goblin-like creature, and they too are creatures of the 12 days of Christmas. They live, for most of the year, in the underworld, and on Christmas Eve, they will emerge and they will run amok in the world of men until the day of the Epiphany. Their appearance is a chaotic and often deeply comical mess of animal and human parts. They are small, hairy, and humanoid, but they often have the legs of a goat, the arms of a monkey, and the horns of a ram. And they are, for the most part, not so much terrifying as they are deeply and profoundly annoying. They are tricksters, and their pranks are often of a scatological and deeply juvenile nature. Their main goal, it seems, is to gain entry into a human home and to defile it. They will try to imitate the human voice, calling out the name of a person inside, and if that person is foolish enough to answer, the Karakonkolos will be able to enter, and once inside, they will wreak havoc. They will urinate on the food, they will defecate in the flour bin, they will break the furniture, and they will generally make a terrible and very smelly mess of the place. There is, however, one simple and deeply effective way to protect your home from a Karakonkolos. You must leave a colander or a sieve on your doorstep. The Karakonkolos, for all its demonic power, is a creature of a very, very limited intelligence and of a profound and deeply obsessive-compulsive nature. When it sees the colander, it will be compelled to stop and to count all of the holes. And it is a very, very bad counter. It can usually only count to 2. It will say 1, 2, and then it will forget the number 3, and it will have to start all over again. And it will be so engrossed in this impossible and deeply frustrating task of counting the holes that it will be caught out by the rising of the sun. And at the first holy light of the dawn, it will be forced to flee, screaming, back to the underworld, your home and your flour bin, safe for another night. The Karakonkolos is a wonderful and deeply strange reminder that sometimes the most effective weapon against the forces of darkness is not a holy symbol or a silver bullet. Sometimes it is just a simple and very, very confusing piece of kitchen equipment. In the mid-18th century, the remote French province of Gévaudan was plunged into a 3-year reign of terror. This was not a ghost story. It was a historical nightmare. A creature, described as a wolf of monstrous size with reddish fur and a massive chest, began to hunt the people of the region. focusing its attacks with a chilling intelligence on women and children. The beast of Gévaudan was no ordinary predator. It killed with a savage, personal cruelty, often targeting the head and neck, and displayed an almost supernatural cunning in evading the thousands of hunters, soldiers, and even nobles sent by King Louis XV himself to destroy it. Over 100 people were killed in a series of brutal, documented attacks that brought a nation to its knees. When a local hunter named Jean Chastel finally killed a large, strange-looking wolf in 1767, the attacks ceased. But the mystery endures. Was it just an unusually large wolf, a wolf-dog hybrid, or something else? The stories of its intelligence and its seeming invulnerability have left behind a dark and enduring legend. That the beast of Gévaudan was not an animal at all, but a werewolf, a human killer hiding behind the teeth of a monster. Deep in the subterranean darkness beneath the old towns of Gascony in southwestern France lurks a creature born of a unique and deeply claustrophobic horror. They call it Loup Carcol, the serpent snail. Legends describe a monster with the long, slimy, and immensely powerful body of a serpent, but on its back, it carries a massive, swirling snail shell into which it can retract. Its most terrifying feature is the great, writhing mass of long, slimy tentacles that surrounds its mouth, each one coated in a powerful, paralyzing slime. The carcol is a patient, subterranean predator. It extends its tentacles up from the cracks and crevices of the earth into the cellars of homes or the dark tangles of the forest, and it waits. Any person or animal unlucky enough to brush against a tentacle is instantly frozen, paralyzed but fully conscious. The monster then, slowly, inexorably, drags its helpless victim down into its dark, underground lair, where it is swallowed whole. Loup Carcol is a terrifying embodiment of the fear of being pulled down, of being consumed by the slow, slimy, and hungry darkness that lives just beneath the fragile surface of our world. In the far western and deeply Celtic peninsula of Brittany, the ancient standing stones and burial mounds are guarded by a race of powerful and often deeply dangerous fairy folk. These are the Corrigans. By day, they are often described as small, ugly, and mischievous goblins. But at night, they can transform into stunningly, supernaturally beautiful women with long golden hair and hypnotic, glowing eyes. They are the guardians of ancient, hidden treasures, and they are deeply hostile to mortals who trespass in their sacred places. On the great festival nights like Samhain, they will emerge from their mounds to dance by the springs and fountains. They will try to lure any mortal man who sees them into their magical, circular dance. To accept the invitation is to be doomed. The man will be forced to dance until he dies of exhaustion, his life force drained away, or he will be dragged down into their subterranean, otherworld kingdom to be their slave forever. The Corrigans are a beautiful, seductive, and deeply fatal reminder that the world of the fairies is not a world of children's stories, but a world of ancient, dangerous, and often very deadly power. Throughout the lonely, nighttime landscapes of rural France, particularly in the region of Normandy, a specific and deeply unsettling kind of female ghost is said to appear at the most dangerous and liminal of places. A narrow bridge over a deep ravine, a sharp turn in a road, a dark crossroads in a forest. These are the Dames Blanches, the White Ladies. They appear as beautiful, stately women, dressed all in white, their faces often obscured by a veil. They will stop a lone traveler, and they will ask them for a favor, most often for the traveler to dance with them. This is a test. If the traveler is courteous and accepts her request, he will be allowed to pass unharmed, and may even be rewarded with good fortune. But if he is rude, if he refuses her, her serene beauty will contort into a mask of pure, terrifying rage. Her punishment is swift and brutal. She will use her supernatural strength to throw the man from the bridge into the ravine below, or she will drag him into the woods to be tormented by goblins and sprites. The Dames Blanches are the ghostly and often very violent guardians of the old, forgotten codes of chivalry. A reminder that in the world of folklore, a simple act of courtesy can be the difference between life and a very, very painful death. The Dames Blanches of France are just one expression of a far more widespread and deeply tragic figure that haunts the entire continent of Europe. This is the archetypal ghost known simply as the White Lady. She is, perhaps, the most common of all European ghosts, a sorrowful apparition that is almost always tied to a specific and often very grand location, like a medieval castle or an old, stately home. Her story is always a tragedy. She is the ghost of a woman who has died a violent or a deeply unjust death. She is the noblewoman who was betrayed by a lover, the bride who was accidentally locked in a chest on her wedding day, the queen who was executed within the castle walls. She is a residual haunting, an emotional stain left on the landscape, and she is doomed to walk the halls of her old home for all eternity, a silent, weeping and deeply beautiful figure in a white flowing dress. While she is, for the most part, a harmless, if deeply sorrowful spirit, her sorrow can sometimes curdle into a form of rage, and in these cases, her appearance can become a terrifying omen of death for the current inhabitants of her home. The White Lady is the ultimate and most enduring of all the ghosts, a timeless and tragic symbol of a love and a life that has been cut violently and unforgivably short. In the year 1284, the German town of Hamelin was suffering from a terrible plague of rats. A strange man, dressed in a coat of many, pied colours, appeared and promised to rid the town of the vermin for a price. He played a magical pipe, and the rats, enchanted, followed him to the river Weser, where they all drowned, but the greedy townspeople refused to pay him. The piper, in a cold fury, returned on a later day, and he played his pipe again. But this time, it was not the rats that followed him. It was the children. 130 of the town's children, enchanted by his hypnotic, irresistible melody, followed him out of the town and up into a high mountain. A great dark door opened in the side of the rock. The piper and all the children walked inside, and the door closed forever. They were never seen again. The story is a terrifying, cautionary tale about the importance of paying your debts. But historians believe it may be a dim, folk memory of a real and deeply tragic historical event, perhaps a plague that specifically targeted the young, or a disastrous crusade or migration that led an entire generation of the town's children away to their deaths. The Pied Piper is not just a fairy tale. He is a beautiful, terrible, and deeply mysterious personification of a great and very real historical loss. In the late 1970s, a new and deeply modern monster was born in the vast, empty, and deeply atmospheric landscape of Bodmin Moor in Cornwall. It began with a series of strange and deeply unsettling livestock killings. And then came the sightings. People began to see a large, cat-like creature, the size of a leopard or a puma, stalking the lonely, mist-shrouded moors. The media frenzy was immediate and intense. The beast of Bodmin Moor was born. The theories were many. Were these the descendants of exotic pets, illegally released into the wild? Were they a surviving relict population of the native European lynx, long thought to be extinct in Britain? Or were they something supernatural, a phantom cat, a modern-day version of the old phantom dog legends? In 1995, the British government launched an official investigation, and their conclusion was a deep disappointment to the believers. There was, they said, no verifiable evidence of any large, exotic cats on the moor. The sightings were all just cases of mistaken identity. But the story, as it always does, was more powerful than the official explanation. The beast of Bodmin Moor lives on, a powerful and deeply modern myth. It is a story that speaks to a deep and perhaps very British desire to believe that their own small and largely tamed island is still wild enough, still mysterious enough, to have a place where a big and very dangerous cat can still hide.